The next matter on the docket is Hicks versus Freeman. And as a preliminary matter to give the parties a little guidance and also the commissioners, the first matter I'd like to speak about is that although we will not be limiting any of the presentations per se from the parties, today's hearing will cease at 3 o'clock. If things are going to go beyond that, we're going to set an additional date for another hearing, or for the hearing to continue. That's the first thing. The second thing is for the, and this is for the commissioners as well, to keep the hearing moving. We are going to introduce a Commissioner Norman, who is the independent, will be ruling on all objections that are brought up during the hearing and the presentation of the evidence. If commissioners, once he rules on an objection, if the commissioners seek that there be further discussion, then we'll address the further discussion at that time. But for the sake of order and keeping things moving, we're going to designate the independent Commissioner Norman to rule on objections. Any questions from the parties at this time before we start? Okay, we're going to proceed with opening statements. Since we've heard this case a great deal, we'd like you to limit those to approximately 5 to 7 minutes for opening. And we will start with the complaint.
Mr. Hicks, before we proceed, generally in a trial proceeding, we have a separation of witnesses.
Amen. So that's what I was going to get up here and first say is I'd like to request that there's a separation of witnesses during this proceeding.
Susan Jones is a witness. She's not a party, but she's also will sit here as the representative of the campaign committee. The two parties are the campaign committee and Mr. Freeman. If there are any witnesses who are not a party to this, we would ask that you step out in the hallway until you're called to testify in this matter.
Chris will go out and get the individuals at the appropriate time.
Either or, yeah.
All right. Are we ready to proceed?
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, Commissioner Beatty. I'm going to try to keep things throughout the day very net and focused and fast as best as I can. I think what you're going to hear today is me trying to prove a case and actually blowing away proving a case. What I think I'm going to prove is that Alan Freeman filmed TV commercials and personally participated in the creation of radio spots. He was directly involved in their review and approval. He promoted them himself online. He engaged continually with JPL and Associates and Constant Content personnel around his media program. One of those personnel even appeared in his ads, and I'll prove that. Freeman and his campaign treasurer personally received a bill from Jeff Longstreth of Constant Content for $290,744.63 on April 1, 2020, which was months before anybody was even indicted in Larry Householder matters. Mr. Freeman filed a post-primary report on June 4, 2020, and across his pre- and post-primary showed expenses of only $14,171.42. By the way, that was a month before anybody was indicted. With minimal due diligence, I'll prove that he could have easily found the invoices in the FCC database and connected that to $138 of invoices, $38,000 of invoices. I filed an affidavit with 6 invoices on September 15, 2020. I specifically noted Constant Content in that filing. In that filing, as well as JPL and Associates, intertwined companies with the same leader. With minimal due diligence, he could have checked them out from my filing and acted to clean up his reporting, but for almost a year he's chosen not to, and I'll prove that. On December 11, 2020, he signed an affidavit in which he claimed things such as I also do not know whether or not the ads listed in the attachments to the complaint were actually for another candidate, or whether or not there was an in-kind contribution in any particular amount that my campaign committee has never been notified of, or complainant has no personal knowledge that my campaign committed, had any debts, any loans, or any in-kind contributions, and neither do I. I'll prove that was not true by showing a constant stream of communications between Constant Content, JPL personnel, and Mr. Freeman and others associated with his campaigns around those media expenditures. And now for the better part of a year, that I would like to say that I think Mr. Freeman has literally passed by a dozen to 100 opportunities to clean up his reporting with information that he could have easily gotten and easily acted upon. I'll also prove that Luke Householder, the son of the speaker, was working for Freeman based on Freeman's own post on Facebook and on personally collected evidence. I'll prove what I think is an outrageous brazen pattern of non-reporting and flaunting the commission and Ohio laws. I allege 3 violations within my affidavits. I'll prove all 3 of them. ORC 3517-13B, failure to file a complete and accurate statement. ORC 3517-10D2, failure to keep a strict account of all contributions from whom received and the purpose for which they were dispersed. And ORC 3599-03B1, acceptance of direct corporate contributions in the case of Constant Content, which is a corporation. But further, I'll prove that the committee also received violated ORC 3517-102C3, accepting contributions above the limits, especially in the case of JPL and Associates, which is an LLC. I'll also prove 2 other referable offenses. One is election falsification that relates to knowingly doing things, and we'll talk about that at some point in this hearing. The second one is a pattern of corrupt activity, ORC 2923.32, which would be the Ohio statutory equivalent to racketeering. My evidence has only gotten stronger on these matters since my original filing, and I'm confident in my proving my case for finding a violation and a fine that is proportionate with the activity through time. It has taken a long time for us to get here.
30 seconds.
I'm glad to be here, and I hope you will listen with an open mind as I make my case and prove each of these points so that we can move forward with the violation of this matter. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, on behalf, the 2 respondents in this case are Alan Freeman and Alan Freeman's campaign committee. Susan Jones is not a respondent, which is why she'll probably testify. This is a simple case that I think is getting convoluted by all these promises to prove things that we never disputed. We have never disputed that there were advertisements that ran with our disclaimer on them, that we participated in some of the creative development of these ads, and that worked with some folks from JPL, among others, to help make them happen. We knew that ads ran. We also knew that we did not know who paid for them, or what the final invoice was, or how to report them. That the simplicity of this case is by quoting a statement that Mr. Hicks made in his deposition. And I quote, "Obviously, somebody cannot report what they do not know." And that, by the way, is an accurate statement of the law. Now, what do you have to know to report a campaign contribution? Because they're supposed to be made through, and you can't make a contribution expenditure except through the treasurer, according to Revised Code 3517-081. And the 3517-10B says, what do you have to report? In other words, what you have to be told about. You have to know what it is. Is this an in-kind from somebody? Is it an in-kind contribution to somebody? Is it an invoice to you? That a vendor that you owe? Is it somebody that they spent money without authorization? A disputed debt is not actually a contribution or expenditure. You have to know what it is. Secondly, you have to know when it was made. What the month, date, and year that the contribution or expenditure or whatever it is was made. Thirdly, you have to know who made it. who paid Constant Contact? Mr. Hicks didn't know his deposition. We don't know either. If there's somebody that spent money on behalf of the campaign, with or without the campaign's authorization, and some of it was clearly without if it was spent, you got to know who that is, and they have to tell you. You can't just have a vendor going out there saying, well, we spent money, you've never heard of us, but by the way, we want to get paid. You have to know why you were paid, the description of the services. Was it a radio ad? Was it a TV ad? Was it a mailing? What was it that the contribution or the expenditure is? And you have to know how much it is. You have to put down a number. And if you don't have that information, you can't report what you don't know, as Mr. Hicks rightly put. Now, I think that it's clear that this stuff should have been reported. The question is, should it have been reported by Mr. Freeman and his campaign committee? It should have been reported by whoever paid for it or whoever incurred a debt. They had a duty under Ohio law to report that to the campaign committee so it can be properly filed. And if there was an in-kind contribution made by somebody, they had a duty to report that. It's not just the campaign committee that has duties. And by the way, this commission already has a case alleging by the Secretary of State in a referral against Larry Householder and JPL and Jeff Longstreet and others saying, we think these people spent money without properly reporting it to the folks that benefited from it. And that would include us. So what happened? In 2019, Mr. Freeman decided to run for state rep. He met with JPL. He never heard of Constant Contact. And if you take a look at exhibits J and K, all those references were JPL, a card from JPL. We all know today that Constant Contact was owned by Jeff Longstreet. He didn't know that. He had no contract agreement with Constant Contact. And ultimately, he authorized Susan Jones to be his treasurer so that all contributions and expenditures were supposed to be made through her. He also gave her authority to let JPL know in real time how much money was in his campaign account. Well, there are a number of reasons for that. I mean, fundraising is obvious, but another reason is if you are authorizing JPL to do anything on your campaign, they have no authority to incur debt that you can't pay. He never authorized anybody to do that, whether it's JPL or Constant Contact. Now, what was Mr. Freeman doing prior to the primary? He was running a primary election. It was a contested primary election. And on April 1, Mr. Hicks mischaracterized this Exhibit W in the book there, which, by the way,
30 seconds.
The Exhibit W was an email invoice saying, please, Constant Contact, not from Jeff Longstreet, but Constant Contact, please, telling Susan Jones, and he's copied on that, but he doesn't remember ever seeing it, pay us $290,000. Now, she had some pushback about this. Nobody ever authorized this kind of money. And ultimately, the contact at JPL said, don't worry about not proper campaign expenditure. You don't have to pay for that. So at the end of the day, he has promised to prove that we knew of the details of campaign expenditures or contributions or whatever they are, and that we intentionally concealed them. He cannot prove that. His opening didn't even offer to prove that. You can prove we were in ads that we know about that doesn't say the amount, when, where, why, and what brand. And that, my friends, is what they needed to tell us. And they had a duty to do it, whoever they was, and we had no duty to report what we didn't know. By the way, Phil Richter agreed with me about that, the Secretary of State agreed with me about that,
Thank you,
and
Mr.
now they're
President.
asking the Commission to have a tiebreaker.
Your case.
I would like to first call Alan Freeman for the specific intent of cross-examining him on his sworn affidavit.
We object. This has already been ruled upon. He doesn't have to testify until he wants to. He may testify as part of a case with Mr.
I would argue that it is not been ruled upon. The motion that you passed said that filing an affidavit in a preliminary hearing did not mean that you couldn't, in a future hearing, take the fifth. I believe that I have the due process right on my side to be able to cross-examine him on his sworn affidavit that he submitted in the preliminary phase of this case. That has not been ruled upon.
If he wants to
I believe
introduce
it's been ruled upon. If he calls himself to testify in this case, I think he opens the door, but I think at this stage, he is entitled to not testify, Mr. Hicks.
I object that I'm unable to examine somebody on their own sworn testimony. It is a testify and run scenario, and I think it's violating my due process rights.
It's so duly noted.
Comments from commissioners. discussion on Commissioner
I
Warren's
think
point.
that if the reason to not testify is taking the fifth, that he should at least be entitled to call the witness and have the witness claim the fifth. That's what they're gonna do. But that's just my opinion.
That's your opinion. We can have him do that. But typically, what I have done in civil matters is counsel has interposed that on behalf of their client, but if we want Mr. Freeman to raise his hand and swear and say, I'm not taking the fifth, the problem I have with that is, at least based on what Mr. Bry said, he may call him his case in chief, which would open the door to any cross-examination.
Yeah, I think somebody has to go on record saying that he's gonna take the fifth. That's just my view.
Mr. Bry?
I will go on the record and say that he is exercising his rights under Article 1, Section 10 of Ohio's Constitution and these rules, not to testify. He's not taking the fifth. They may be equivalent, but the very reason he wants us to use those words is the very reason we don't want to use them.
I still believe that I have the right to examine him on his sworn statement, and I think you guys should consider the ugly precedent it will be if people can file affidavits into the election commission and then are not subject to any cross-examination on their own sworn statements. He could have had a sworn statement that said he took the fifth when he filed this.
I think that's already been ruled on by the commission. Mr. Hicks, I would say at this stage, move on to your next witness, please.
Or is there any other commissioner comments?
I'm sorry?
I asked if there were any other commissioner comments.
I asked that as well, and someone has made a comment and no other comments.
Okay. Then I call Megan Fitzmartin.
I got it.
Is this supposed to be the witness chair?
Yes,
Can it be put there so that they can see the screen that I brought to be able to play video evidence?
Sure.
sure.
Plus then I can sit down and move it. We need to rotate it here so they can swing back and forth.
You're going to have it.
Is that okay?
Sit there. You turn the chair so she can see the screen.
Oh, okay, that's fine. I already did.
Okay. That's what I said, we turn the chair.
That's fine.
For purposes of our hearing today, I don't care, I don't know if any commissioners care if Mr. Hicks goes to the podium and goes to the chair. It's probably easier for the chair to keep documents, but if anybody has an objection, please speak up.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Fitzmartin.
Before we proceed, can we swear in the witness, please?
So, I'm sorry. You need to swear me in, by the way, don't you?
Yeah,
you haven't testified yet.
Yeah, that should have been sworn in.
Do you swear to affirm that the testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but?
I do. Thank you for appearing today, Ms. Fitzmartin. Can you briefly describe for me what was your role in Alan Freeman's campaign for House District 66 in the primary in 2020?
As a contractor for JPL and Associates and Constant Content,
I'm going to apologize, I'm partially deaf and have a little hard time hearing, so can you speak up so I can hear you as well? Thank you.
As a 1099 contractor for JPL and Associates and Constant Content, I provided political consulting and media advising for Alan Freeman.
Okay, and what was your personal relationship with Alan Freeman in terms of his campaign? How much did you communicate with him? How much did you talk with him?
And communicated quite a bit. I'm not sure I can quantify that.
Okay, so quite a bit quantifying in some way at least. Can you describe for me who you were? You said you worked for JPL and Associates. Could you describe for me how exactly you were compensated and what you believe to be the structure of Constant Content in JPL?
JPL and Associates was a political consulting firm that I was a vendor for. The Constant Content was a media and content, as the name suggests, company that I was also a vendor for.
So you worked for both organizations?
Yes, I was a 1099 for both organizations.
For both, so you were 1099 for both organizations. You were not a regular employee of either organization. Okay. So beyond that, from the management structure of JPL and Constant Content, could you describe how they were managed, or were they separate management systems, the same management system? you work for both?
Yeah, Jeff Longstreth was my point of contact for both.
For both Constant Content and JPL and Associates? Do you still work for JPL and Associates or Constant Content? And if not, where do you work now?
I do not work for either. I terminated my association with both entities on July 3rd of last year. And I currently have as I always have, I continue to have my own consulting entity and also publishing my real estate lessons last year.
Okay, so if I need a house, I can contact you
Yes.
in this area, or wherever you live, okay? Were you present when Alan Freeman's TV commercials were filmed? And where were they filmed?
In Claremont County.
Okay, who else was present?
Oh,
Was
There
Gene
were-
Schmidt present, for example?
yes, Gene Schmidt was present, Brian Manton was present, another candidate, obviously Alan, and then we had the film crew and a couple of other individuals that were associated with the candidates.
Can I make a request? Can you turn your chair and face all the commissioners so that we can see?
Sorry.
Because it's, and I appreciate there's going to be some things on the screen, but
Okay,
We can move
I want to
this.
make sure everybody's seeing you and hearing what you have to say. Thank you. My apologies.
okay, I'm gonna play, right after that, so I understand this, but right after this, I'm gonna play something on the screen.
We can move the screen
I wanna
closer.
be careful on not messing something up on
Okay.
connections,
And
so.
Mr. Hicks, if you'd like to move over here with the podium and
Okay.
address your questions that
Well, I
way,
wanna
so you
have
can
this-
see
I
the
think-
witness, that's your choice.
It's a difficult,
It's a weird.
would it be possible to like move, if we agree to not use the podium, move her back, then we could still sit here and everybody could see everything?
That's fine by me.
Yeah, I may use the podium, but you set up however you want for your question.
Just,
So
yeah,
if we
pull
just
it
move
back.
this,
It is mobile, we can both move it.
Actually,
Why don't you
Tilt
set
it, we
the
can
podium
roll.
back here so that we
oh, that's,
Yeah,
we can move it wherever, it's just heavy, I don't wanna get a
What do you
workers'
suggest
comp
on
claim.
move her back?
Oh, it's on wheels?
You can see the
Okay.
side
I'm
things.
not saying bring the podium back here, so if you're crossing
I think
and
it's
you're
right
talking to the
well,
witness,
you
you
got
can
the
do
wire
it
there.
facing the witness.
I think you can hear, I'll help you roll over the wire. Here.
It's a weird one.
So if it snags, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Now, if we move her here, then everybody can see her. Is that okay?
Sorry about that.
I'm only for yours.
Couldn't see that. Yeah.
I'm gonna play a commercial up here that was in my file, exhibit 22A, but it was an electronic item. Let's see if I do this right, if I do it right.
A small business owner, a strong conservative, a family man, Alan Freeman will bring these same conservative values to the Ohio House, building business and a better Ohio for all our families. Alan Freeman for State Representative.
Okay, so is that an ad that you were there when it was filmed?
Yes.
Were you at, I think it might have been a couple locations, were you at all the locations that were used for the film? And then at the beginning of this, there's a person sitting at the table. Is that you?
It is.
Okay. So I asked you, and I kind of jumped to the commercial, who all was present. Was there anybody else that was present? You mentioned Brian Lampton and Gene Schmidt and some other candidate people that were present, but who else was present? Like, was Jeff Longstreth present?
No, he was not.
Was Stephen Caraway present?
Yes, that is part of the,
Okay.
I can't.
That's okay, I'm not trying to be, so, I'm not asking you to have perfect memory of who, everybody that was there. I can't remember who was out in the hallway. So what was your role beyond Alan Freeman? What was your role? Oh, hold on, I want to play another commercial just to get these out of the way. If I can. And this is a longer commercial.
Is this 22B or was it?
22B, I'm sorry, yes, 22B.
Conservative groups like Buckeye Firearms Association, Ohio Right to Life, and Ohio Value Voters reject Owens. What is fake conservative Dick Owens hiding from us? True conservative Alan Freeman has always represented us. That's why Freeman is the only candidate endorsed by Ohio Right to Life, Ohio Value Voters, and Freeman earned the highest possible rating from Buckeye Firearms Association. True conservative conservative Alan Freeman for state representative.
Now, just for the record, could you just read for me what the disclaimer says at the bottom of that commercial?
Paid for by committee to elect Alan Freeman.
Okay. Was this commercial, I know the Nick Owens stuff is different, but the parts that were Alan Freeman filmed at the same time as the other commercial?
Yeah.
There was no
Because
second
those
filming
clips
or
from
anything like
the
that?
previous commercial.
Okay, so, at the time, would you say you,
Sorry, just to clarify, with the exception of the picture.
oh, okay, I meant the video part, so I
Right,
wasn't
right.
meaning that. So, okay, at the time when you were present, were you representing or being paid for by JPL, by Constant Content, or is that kind of just mixed up?
Well, given the fact that this was a media, and also political, because we discussed, campaign issues, I'd say both.
So you received a 1099 from both JPL and Associates and Constant Content?
Correct.
How did you keep track of which one would go where?
That wasn't my responsibility. I was
Did you get paid an hourly rate or
I
just
was
a
not
fixed
paid
rate?
hourly.
First
Just
of
a
all,
fixed rate?
we need to let her finish answering
I'm
the
sorry.
question, and you need to let her, we can't talk over each other, court reporter can't take it on, we're not getting complete
I
answers. So
apologize.
if you would, let each other finish.
I was given a flat rate from each entity. I was not paid hourly.
Beyond Alan Freeman, what was your role with Larry Householder or Team Householder candidates?
I was associated with the team as an individual that would be a part of candidate and members' campaigns. So I helped with political advising and the paid media and earned media side of their campaigns as well.
What was your relationship with Jeff Longstreth?
He was the individual that had each entity, JPL and Associates and Constant Content, that I was contracted with.
How often did you interact with Jeff Longstreth?
Almost every day.
Did Jeff Longstreth direct you that certain things should be Constant Content, certain things should be JPL?
So as both entities were described to me, JPL Associates was the political consulting entity and Constant Content was the media content entity for the campaigns.
On Alan Freeman's commercials, did you play any role in the booking or working with strategic media placement on the placement of those?
I certainly communicated that buy was going to be taking place. However, I did not direct nor had any interface with the placement.
Okay. What about the production? Did you make arrangements for example, the video shoots, so forth? Who made the arrangements for that?
That would be a part of my role,
Your role, okay.
as I did for a number of members and candidates across
Okay.
the state.
What was your role with Growth and Opportunity PAC or Generation Now?
I never communicated with either expenditure, especially with regards to the campaign committees.
So you're saying you had no role with them or you had some role with them?
I had no role with Growth and Opportunity PAC, and I briefly had a role with Generation Now during an issue campaign, but not during this election cycle.
So I want to play another commercial. Get to the right place here.
What exhibit is this, Mr. Hicks?
23. No, I don't, and that's not we don't want any copper-fit gloves, but so I don't, that last video clip, I don't recognize that from the other video clips.
Okay.
When the last video, maybe it was, but I don't remember the standing in front of the house one in the other commercials. Were you present when that clip was filmed?
If it was stated on the video when we were filming shoots, then yes, but I don't recall that exact
Yeah, 'cause
shot.
I think that's a front, like, I don't know if it's a front, but that one. Now, these clips, that's the same person, the same location in another ad. Were you present when these were filmed?
No, it was not.
So everybody's wearing the same clothes, they're in the same place, but you're saying that this was filmed when you weren't present?
I don't believe so.
Objection, he's asking and assuming questions not yet testified to.
Overruled.
I can play the other commercials so we can see the footage. I could play this again, it would help you to recollect your memory of when these things were filmed.
He overruled my objection.
You can answer.
Maybe she has to answer, yeah.
Right. So again, I don't recall this scene being filmed when I was present.
So, I'm gonna go back and play, I apologize, I'm not doing this computer here. I'm gonna go back and play, hopefully the short one has it in there, so 22A. Did I think that guy's in there?
A small business owner, a strong conservative, a family man, Alan Freeman will bring these same conservative values to the Ohio House, building business in a better Ohio for all our families. Alan Freeman for state representative.
So it's entirely possible.
Wait, I need to make sure I didn't hear the question that was posed. I apologize.
I just said same size, same clothes, and then I'm going to respond.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So, are you saying you weren't present when the video footage was filmed for the Growth and Opportunity commercial, but you were present when it was filmed for his own commercial?
I would object, to form the question, he could ask her directly rather than saying, are you saying?
Okay, well,
Overruled, I think she knows.
Okay.
What I think I'm trying to understand is there could, there are multiple days where content could have been filmed or shot. And that everything was not necessarily done on one specific day.
okay, so you're maintaining that you were not present when it was filmed for Growth and Opportunity?
I am maintaining that when the specific scene that you asked if I was present during, I do not recall being present for that one scene.
And that was exhibit 23, I believe, for the
Correct,
record.
that was the Growth and Opportunity PAC commercial. And I want to go fast here, but just because I want to be clear, I'm going to play that one again, 23. I think there might be some other footage in there. I just want to confirm from you which ones you claim you were not present at and which ones. I'm going to stop it here. Oops, I can stop it. I need an AV guy to help me. So here's another one, which is in a restaurant setting. Do you happen to know what, in his commercial, because there's somewhere where I can go back to it, do you happen to know what restaurant that was?
Oh goodness, I usually rely on local individuals. I don't remember the name. I was certainly present at that restaurant, though, but I do not remember the name. It's somewhere in Claremont County.
Okay, so you see
I've been to a
that.
lot of restaurants around the state.
And I want to keep moving here as fast as I can, but I just want to establish, so this setting, you can see the people in the background and who was there. The other setting, we had the two people wearing the same clothes in the same location. And I want to go back to, I hope I don't unnecessarily play any of these. But I'm going to go back to, let's see if it's in the short one, which is 22A. I'm trying
A
not.
small business owner, a strong
Okay, so
conservative.
So let's go back, this is 22A. So this is, actually, I've looked at this pretty closely, it's actually a different shoot, the footage is different for the way the camera moves. But this is the same setting in his own commercial. Were you present when this was filmed?
Yes.
So that in the Growth and Opportunity one, were you present when that was filmed?
So what I think we're trying to ascertain is if I was present during the Growth and Opportunity film shoot, and that is not the case. Because what happened is that these clips are publicly available, so any entity is allowed to use them.
Okay, I'm gonna move on from this, but I just want to explore just a second here because they're actually different clips. It's not, so we can go play them screen by screen, but it's not that somebody lifted the clip out of one and put it in the other. They're actually different clips that shot at slightly different angles.
During film shoots, you typically have multiple cameras, so you can get multiple angles.
So where was the footage that wasn't used in his campaign ads publicly available that you're aware of?
That wasn't my responsibility, so I don't know.
Well, you made the representation that it was publicly available, so I just thought you could support why you made that representation.
Certainly YouTube, but I don't know what avenue.
Okay. I'm gonna move on. How did you get approval for Alan Freeman Media?
Can you better explain and clarify?
How did you get approval? I don't know how to clarify that more. How did you get approval? Did you get approval from Alan Freeman? Did you get approval from Jeff Longstreth? From Stephen Caraway?
I mean, Alan would approve the spots before they went live,
And what do you mean by going live?
going to the placement agency.
And who got his approval, you or somebody else?
I did.
Okay, so that helps a lot because there were text messages of approvals and so forth in the exhibit. So was that the typical way that approvals were done, or you talked with them, or?
To get, approvals from candidates, I've communicated in a variety of ways: text, email, phone conversation, in-person conversation, just depends on the day.
So with Alan Freeman, was there a predominant method by which you got approval? A common way that you did it, or all those ways?
I can't really say if there is one, if one way was more than another, but I would say it's a mixed bag, as it is with usually everyone.
I want to make sure I heard you correctly. Did you say I got approval from Mr. Freeman before this went live?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. And just for clarification, I provided I think 15-minute clip and a 30-minute clip. 60 minute. That'd be wild to have a campaign
We'd be here all
15 minutes.
Those attention spans are typically that
That would
long.
cause people to never vote again. So, those two, were there other spots? Those are the two that I ever got access to directly. Were there other spots other than those that you got approval from Alan Freeman, or was it just those two distinct spots?
Not to my knowledge, but I don't recall any other.
Any other ones of those two?
Correct, sorry. You did. Right.
Okay, so I went to, have you look at something that is Exhibit 12 in my set? And I have a copy of it for her, so I don't have copies for all you, but I have copies for her. And I can, if we need to see it better, I can also pull it up on the screen. But those are, and I'll tell you what it is, and I'll ask you a couple questions about it, or what I think it is. So, in his discovery, Stephen Caraway provided emails that had links to Dropbox, and that's where I got one of the commercials from. And on that links in Dropbox, your name is on the, has an account. And it says, and I just want you to confirm that I'm not misrepresenting anything, that your Dropbox account was Megan Fitzmartin Constant Content.
No, it was not. So my Dropbox account I've had a personal Dropbox account for quite some time, and I had access to the Constant Content Dropbox, as did a variety of vendors.
May I ask if she has what we have in front of us? Is that what she has?
She does.
2 pages.
Yeah, you just gave her.
Okay.
I gave her.
Information.
So I just want to, because of this, I just want to make sure, because it's not very visible on what I printed out because it's small. We could go on the web and look at it, but I can blow it up here on the screen from the file. So it says, aren't you Megan Fitzmartin? Doesn't it say constant content?
Is that a yes?
Yeah, sorry, yes.
Thank you.
So do you want to reflect on whether your constant content credentials listed you as, your Dropbox credentials listed you as constant content?
I have my own Dropbox, and then Constant Content also had a Dropbox in which I had access to those files.
So when you were using this account, you were acting as a constant content employee at that point in time?
Not an employee. no.
1099.
Yes, the files were stored in the Constant Content Dropbox.
And did these Dropbox links to it, in the emails that I've obtained, it would appear that these were being used to get approvals from Alan Freeman. And so could you just reflect on, was this the method by which you shared commercials with him for being for his approval, which is where I got one of the commercials from?
Objection, I don't think there was a question other than asking her to reflect.
Well, I think she can answer it.
It's so, due to the large file sizes of a number of things that I would seek, a number of content pieces that I would get approval for, I would either send links to candidates or some of them that unfortunately didn't have a lot of internet access, I would then have to download and share. So I've shared in both forms. I don't recall every single time I sought approval that it was via link with Alan.
But so you don't recall whether that was the way that you?
The only way, I just don't want to.
So it was a way?
There's a, yes,
I'm sorry.
it's certainly a way.
Okay. Is that the way that you shared with other candidates as well?
As I just stated, it varied depending on, what the candidate's comfort level was with computer savviness. And so whether either link or I download the file and share, but obviously that took a while because sometimes files can be large.
When you got Mr. Freeman's approval, what happened next?
I would communicate with our media vendor that the spot was approved,
Who was that vendor?
strategy group.
And who would you communicate with specifically?
Primarily Scott Schweitzer.
Okay. So I want to be clear on what you represented. You said you didn't have anything to do with the media placement, but you were the one that communicated with the vendor who ran the
Who
media?
then did the placement. So placement to me, and just to clarify, means talking to the media stations and actually saying, can you place X spot in between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. during the news? And that was never my role, and never anything that I've done or have experience doing. That's why I think placement is that way, so just to clarify.
Thank you. Did you see the placements? Did you see when they developed the placement plans, the stuff that comes from, did you see those?
At times, yes. Sometimes candidates, members wanted to see, hey, when's my commercial being played? So we'd request those spots, but that wasn't always the case.
Who communicated to, I'm going to call them SMP, Strategic Media Placement, just to be simpler here. Who communicated with them the amount of spend that should take place?
I don't know the answer to that.
So you were aware of any,
I
what
would
the
never
amount?
communicate directly with SMP. Sorry, never communicate directly with SMP.
I thought you said just before that you communicated with them once Alan gave his approval.
I'm trying to distinguish, I communicate with Strategy Group Media, and I've never, so if you're referring to them as two separate entities, I wanted to continue that as well.
So given that you've brought that up, can you explain to me what your belief is, what the difference is between SGM, I guess, Strategy Group Media, and SMP?
Strategy Group, the SMP is the placement entity under Strategy Group Media.
Okay. So one is, in your view, one is a subordinate to the other.
I don't know the answer to that. So I guess I should not use what associated with, affiliated with.
Okay, I'm going to give you something else. You can give me that one back. This is from Mr. Bray's exhibits. So it's Exhibit W from Mr. Bray's exhibits. Bry. Sorry. So that, have you seen that document before?
I'm sorry, what exhibit is that?
W.
Exhibit W. Sorry, I apologize, I probably missed that.
Freeman.
I have not seen this document before.
So, okay, so you've never seen that document before?
This is the first time I've seen these documents.
Okay. Did you ever discuss with Alan Freeman his media cost?
I'm sure during budget discussions, we've talked broadly about the cost of the campaign.
Can you be more specific than that? You said we talked broadly about the cost of the campaign. Did you speak specifically with him about cost of media in that campaign?
Not that I recall in terms of specific costs, other than, helping connect him with a fundraiser so that we can raise money to the account.
I'm sorry, I missed the tail end of that.
Other than, knowing that campaigns cost money, connecting with individuals who can assist with fundraising into his campaign account.
Did you communicate with anybody else about media costs associated with Alan Freeman's campaign?
Certainly Jeff Longstreth knew. And, we could ascertain budgeting from strategy group.
When you generally talked about the overall campaign cost with Mr. Freeman, can you remember any specific, just order of magnitude, how much money you talked about being involved with the campaign?
That would primarily be Jeff Longstreth's role.
Well, but you said that you had general discussions with him
I
about
was a part of discussions. I don't want to say that wasn't in the room, but Jeff Longstreth was the individual who would talk about, how much money would be spent on campaigns.
So, but I guess I'm confused, because you said you had general conversations with Alan Freeman about the cost of his campaign, and now I'm not sure what you're saying. Can you just elaborate on what conversations did you have with or without other people involved in the conversations specific to the cost of Alan Freeman's campaign that you already represented, you had such conversations?
Insofar as campaigns cost money, you would talk about, how to raise money into his campaign. So, did we acknowledge that TV costs money? Yes. So let's help raise the money that it costs.
So how much money we're trying to raise?
The common phrase was the limit does not exist.
A limit does not exist.
In terms of helping raise money, you certainly have goals, but let's try and raise what you can.
So I haven't been personally involved with many campaigns in a deep way, but there might be like, we plan to have a $100,000 media campaign and we have to raise the money for it versus, so you have a specific goal. I've always seen there be a goal that, I need this much, and if I don't get to this much. So you're saying that you had these discussions and there was, how did you describe it, no limit or whatever on what we need to raise?
It's the, let's raise as much as you can so that you can spend what what we can do to win. So I guess yes, there's a goal. There's a goal to cover your mail costs and your media costs, but let's, if you go beyond that goal, that's a.
So was there ever a specific goal of how much money you were trying to raise for Alan Freeman's campaign?
I did not raise money into Alan's campaign. However, I don't recall there being a specific goal.
Okay. I'm just going to move on. SMT claimed in an affidavit that I can share with you if you'd like to see a copy of it, just an exhibit, that Constant Content paid bills for Alan Freeman. You represented that you were a 1099 consultant with Constant Content, who was the media side of JPL, which is what you also represented. Were you aware of those payments?
Payment and billing wasn't a part of my role.
So you were not aware?
I knew that when a bill came from the strategy group, that it was supposed to go to Constant Content as the media entity, but in terms of paying and billing, I was not a part of, that was not my role or in my purview.
So you mentioned when bills came from strategy group, they had to get to billing or whatever. Can you say that again? You said something to the effect of Or we could have the reporter read it back, but you said something about when the bill came, it had to get to so-and-so. Can you say that again, what you said?
When a bill came in, it would go through from strategy group, it would go to constant content.
Okay, and how do you know that if you weren't involved in?
That's a good question. I did, again, from the media perspective, strategy group was a media partner with constant content, and so that's why it's media and media.
Did you see those bills ever? Ever?
Occasionally.
So I'm gonna. if I can find the right thing here. So this is. Too much paperwork. Okay, so this is in my pack. Mr. Bray has these in his also, but these is number 13. So it's invoices from strategy and media. So some of them are for Alan Freeman specifically. Some of them are for multiple candidates on one bill. Did you see any or all of these?
I would certainly have seen some of these.
Can you identify which ones you believe any of these that you believe you did not see?
I mean,
Or
I don't
two?
recall. I'm sorry. I think there are a lot of them.
So I think there's 6, or, there's more than that in here. Okay, so what was your role, why did you see them if you weren't involved in that?
Occasionally, individuals would confuse my role and conflate my role with other people associated with the organization.
Okay, so I just want to kind of wrap up and hit on a couple of things just to confirm some of your answers. So, I'm not asking you to repeat them, but you were when you did the media shoots, you saw some of the invoices. You were a dual 1099 of Constant Content and JPL. You were working on fundraising for a media program.
I was not working on fundraising, no.
You had
I
discussions
never
about
fundraised,
fundraising.
actually.
You had discussions about the
I
budget.
would connect candidates and members with individuals who, that's far and away their expertise, not mine.
Okay, other than that correction, the thank you from that remark, is there anything else that I represented that's not consistent with what your answers were?
I do not believe so.
Okay. Did you have any, just a couple quick wrap-up questions, did you have any conversations with Stephen Caraway about any of these strategy and media invoices that you said you saw, at least some of them?
I don't believe so, other than making sure fundraising calls were being made.
How about Anna Lippencourt?
I'm sorry.
How about Anna Lippencourt or Lippencourt?
Anna was the individual that did billing, and so that's the primary individual that I would send. If I accidentally received invoices or anything, I would send them her way.
What do you mean by accidentally received?
So as I stated, sometimes individuals confused Anna and I were in our roles, and so we just have to usually send each other what was really in our kind of wheelhouse. So if political stuff went to me, and then billing and kind of operations went to Anna.
Okay, so I think just I want to clean something up here just to make sure I'm clear on it is, what was your relationship with Scott Schweitzer during this period? Of JP, of SMP, what strategic strategy and media, what have you?
So as a, strategy group was a vendor that was used frequently, so I communicate with him as anyone would as a vendor on a campaign.
Okay. One thing I left out too, just to confirm, is you said Alan Freeman approved the ads, and that's when you took them to strategy group for them to get placed.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I think that's all my questions for you. Oh, thank you.
I have a few. Is it more comfortable for me to ask from here?
I defer to you.
Mr. Fry, I think for our purposes, it's probably easier if you're at the podium, only because then the witness is looking forward to us as opposed to you.
Okay.
And I apologize.
No, I am, notwithstanding your experience, I'm more flexible than you think.
Thank you.
Was Alan Freeman's campaign the only campaign you were involved with in 2020?
No,
Was it the only campaign that JPL or Constant Content were involved
no.
in? And approximately how, were you working for just a couple or numerous or house campaigns?
Well, I was working for every Republican caucus member, as well as, you know, so in day-to-day work, and then there were 10 to 12 primaries, I can't remember the exact number, believe it or not, I knew at the time, but 10 primaries that were contested.
And after, well, you know, of course, that Alan Freeman was unsuccessful in his primary race in the 2020 primary.
Is that a yes?
Sorry, yes,
Thank you.
apologies.
After he lost his primary, in terms of the races you've been represented, where was your focus?
Onto the general election. Especially given the fact that the 2020 primary was extended, it's probably, a lot of folks know, it was a very quick turnaround to get things focused on the general.
Did you know that Alan Freeman's campaign was providing information in real time to JPL about how much money was in its campaign account?
I mean, certainly we knew that, you know, cash on hands were reported for, you know, a number of candidates, especially those in contested primaries.
I think I heard you say that you were not involved with JPL finances.
Correct.
And were you also not involved with Constant Content finances?
That is correct.
And were you involved in giving or reviewing financial notices, bills
not.
or notices of any kinds from JPL or Constant Content to candidates?
No, that was not my role.
You testified a couple times that Mr. Freeman approved the content of various ads.
That's correct.
In your communications with him about approval, did he ever agree to any amount that could be spent on those ads?
I do not believe so, no.
And in your communications with him, did you ever tell him, this is how much will be spent on these particular ads?
Not that I recall, no.
When the ads were ran, you know, through strategic media or whoever,
Right.
sometimes the bills would come to you.
Right.
But is that because people confuse your role with that of analytic?
Yes.
And analytic, I take it, was the person who was responsible for looking at those bills and deciding what to do.
It's her kind of umbrella is much more operations focused, so I would say that.
Do you know whether analytic is an employee or a 1099 contractor?
She was a 1099.
Do you know how the expenses for Alan Freeman's campaign media supplies were handled?
I do not.
Do you know whether or not there was a plan in place with Alan Lippincott or Jeff Longstreth or somebody else at JPL or Constant Content to deal with these expenditures?
I do not.
Are you aware of any invoices that were sent from JPL to the Alan Freeman campaign?
I'm not.
Are you aware, or have you seen any invoices from Constant Content to the Alan Freeman campaign?
I don't believe so.
Are you aware of any notices of in-kind expenditures that were sent to the Alan Freeman campaign?
No.
Would you agree you can't report what you don't know?
That is correct.
Nothing further.
Mr. Hicks, any redirect?
I do have a few redirects. So you said you worked with, based on his question, you said you worked with members of the Republican caucus. Was Alan Freeman a member of the Republican caucus, to your knowledge?
He was not, which is why I explained that it's both members of the Republican caucus and contested primaries.
Okay, so what was the criteria by which then you worked with contested primaries?
As the Speaker of the House, if Larry Householder endorsed an individual in the contested primary, then I would work with that candidate.
So it was not based on whether the Ohio Republican Party endorsed that candidate, as they did not in the Alan Freeman case?
Correct.
Okay. He asked you a lot of questions about invoices.
Objection, is he asking her, he asked her two questions. Did the Ohio Republican Party endorse?
No, I asked her one question.
Well, then he testified about the other, and I think that's improper.
Why don't you clarify, Mr. Hicks?
So my question was that, that to your knowledge, that you work with candidates based on Larry Householder endorsing them, not based on the Ohio Republican Party having endorsed them.
That's correct. As
Okay, and
had
I
in the
added,
previous
might have
cycle.
created confusion because I added the parenthetical, as they did not in the case of Alan Freeman. The Ohio Republican Party did not endorse him, so I apologize for not being clear. You talked, now you said he asked you questions about whether you saw invoices that went to Alan Freeman. In the last year, more than that, since April 1 of 2020 to today, did anybody ask you for any records you had of invoices? I'm asking that question specifically, Megan, because you said you sometimes got these invoices for Alan Freeman Media. Did anybody from the campaign or otherwise ask you for copies of any invoices you had so that the campaign could determine what they should be reporting?
I don't remember.
So you said you talked to, in my testimony that he asked you about the bills, you said you talked to Alan Freeman, I think you said like every day or pretty close to every day or very frequently. And I saw he has a lot of text messages and so on and so forth. So were you not accessible to Alan Freeman later, or he just never asked you, or was there some, not breakup, but you know what I'm saying, where you would you have responded? Let me ask a clear question. Had you been asked, would you have provided those copies of the invoices you had received to Alan Freeman or his campaign?
I likely would have said, talk to Anna.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I likely would have said, talk to Anna, because again, that wasn't everything that was sent to me accidentally, I forwarded to her, so, that was a much more complete picture of what's going on.
So so Anna's not here, so I can't, but had he asked you to specifically, well, can you specifically send me any of those that you have? Would you have sent them to him?
I would have said, talk to Anna.
So you would not have sent them to him?
No, because again, she would have she would have kept the database of them. That's my understanding.
Okay, just on the bills again. How did this, on the bills, was there ever a bill for your time and effort?
No, there's not.
Okay, and were you ever disclosed, as far as you know, on any candidates' campaign finance reports for your 1099 work with them as constant content?
Not to my knowledge.
Did you ever, or were you aware of did anybody ever ask you to provide information on how much of you should be in kind or otherwise reported by these candidates?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, I don't have anything further.
Any commissioners have any questions?
On Exhibit 12, I think you were provided that, maybe you could give it to her. Just have a question, just a clarification.
Yes.
Or, I'm sorry, I think that's 13.
Oh, sorry.
It's the series of invoices. Now, as I look at all of these invoices in Exhibit 13, they all say bill to constant content. They're all from strategic, apparently. But when you get in the back, they have paid stamped on it. Do you know who paid for these invoices? Do you know?
I do not know.
Okay.
Ma'am, I'm looking at exhibit 13, and if I look at all of the invoices, they reference under projects as Alan Freeman. I know there's one where there are for additional candidates, but these all relate to production for, at least in part, to Alan Freeman, correct?
Just so I'm answering your question correctly, which invoices?
There's multiple invoices under exhibit 13. When I look at them, they all reference this project Alan Freeman, 2020 Ohio House District 66. I'm assuming that's for his campaign, correct?
Correct.
And I know all but one of them appear to be exclusively for services for Mr. Freeman's campaign, correct?
I guess I shouldn't have answered the previous question because I'm inferring since I don't produce this document, so this was produced, it seems like I should.
And what you,
Strategy group.
and what you have, Megan, the page he's referring to says 245 at the bottom. The one that's for multiple candidates.
I'm simply trying to understand that, I'm inferring that it's about Alan Freeman just based on this document, and that, media, he lives in the Cincinnati media market.
If we look at all of these invoices, it appears to be for Mr. Freeman's campaign, except for the one, and I guess it would be page 5, I believe, where there are a number of candidates listed. It was Stewart, Lampton, Freeman, Schmidt, and Young. All the others appear to be exclusively for Mr. Freeman, correct?
Yes, they appear to be.
And would it be, do you have an understanding of whether Constant Content would have then forwarded these invoices to the Freeman campaign for them to have paid these?
That wasn't my role, so I can't.
You wouldn't have any knowledge whatsoever?
I think that was the role of another individual that worked for the organization.
Did you ever have any discussions with anybody at Constant Content or JPL about paying these invoices and how your companies are going to get paid for the services that were allegedly performed?
I would forward these, and if I accidentally received these invoices, I would forward them to the individual who did billing for Constant Content.
And so you wouldn't have ever forwarded any of these to Mr. Freeman?
No, just Constant Content.
Related question.
Yes.
Okay, if these are invoices were forwarded to the other individual, what was so for instance, many times when you pass something on to a controller and there are numbers related person, there may be some type of check back just to make sure that this is a legitimate invoice. How would the other individual know that this was for, since you, in my understanding from the testimony, you were the individual that would pass this on to the ultimate media company to do the placement, correct? Would the other individual, excuse me for forgetting her name, would she have to check back with you to make sure that this was a legitimate invoice for services that were done during a period of time?
We would have this discussion of, yes, this was a commercial that was placed on air. We communicated daily because we worked out of the same office, or I guess not out of the same office, but we would meet at the same office multiple times a week.
Okay.
I'm looking at an invoice dated March 9 of 2020, and the amount of the invoice is $95,000. Do you have that in front of you?
And what you did,
I do.
Looks like it might be the third page. Do you have that?
I did.
It's got an invoice number too, Scott.
I'm sorry?
It's got a unique invoice number.
That was
On your
your
page, it says 244
67.
For reference purposes, the blue numbers at the bottom might be an easier way to find out what page we're
I don't have any blue numbers at the
But it's
bottom.
black
of
and
it.
white.
So just so the commissioners are aware, I gave them out a copy that has just a footnote number on there. So yours is
Mine does
invoice
not,
number
otherwise I would reference that,
6707.
or a big stamp or something, but I don't have that.
Sorry.
But the
So it's invoice
Right,
6707 dated March 9 of 2020. The amount of the invoice is $95,000. Do you see that?
I do.
Is that something that would be communicated to Mr. Freeman before that invoice would be approved, or before the service would be approved to submit $95,000 worth of ad time?
Sometimes and sometimes not.
So
So I
sometimes-
don't recall this exact invoice, I don't recall this exact invoice being communicated,
but it
But-
could have been.
But as it relates to Mr. Freeman, there were times when he had to approve invoices being submitted as opposed to other times you just don't know. Is that fair?
Oh, I'm just saying candidates broadly. I apologize, not
And
necessarily.
I don't care about other
specific.
candidates, we're here about Mr. Freeman. As it relates to Mr. Freeman, before Constant Content is gonna spend almost $100,000 on advertising time, is that something he would have need to approve?
Not necessarily, no.
And do you have any specific recollection of Mr. Freeman approving content time or expenses before they were actually incurred?
No, not specifically.
Any other commissioners with any other questions?
I just have one. Going back to the invoice that was just referenced, 6707, there's not much specific in the invoice. Are these generally the way the strategic media placement produced invoices without much information about number of spots, amount per spot, so that the candidate would have as much information about what this money was going for?
Insofar as the ones that I have seen, this seems fairly common, but I would defer obviously to strategy group for how they invoiced.
Any other questions, Commissioner? Counsel, any other follow-up for this witness?
Just one. Megan, as you look through Exhibit 13, do you have a specific recollection of ever having seen these invoices before?
I am sure that I've seen some. I'm not sure that I've seen all. That's all.
Nothing further.
I had one quick follow-up. I'm so confused on this when you got accidentally sent. So SM's strategy and media, how did that happen? Was it different people that would send them, and some of the people sent them to you and some sent, or the same person was getting confused and sending them sometimes to you, didn't know which person? Just expand on what do you mean by you, better help me understand what you mean by you got accidentally sent them.
There are several questions in there. I would ask they limit themselves to one.
Overall, go ahead.
Certainly don't want to speak for other people and how they operate, but I would presume that if I'm the individual that you're communicating with on approvals and kind of coordinating with the candidate on spots, and then you just, that communication is going back and forth, and just also send, but there are a number of individuals from the group that you would communicate with, certainly if it was just kind of that.
So how, just to follow up, and I'll
Probably
be
great
done, is
name gesture.
how many invoices do you think you were accidentally sent?
I-
Like if you generally quantify it?
I cannot answer that. I don't have an idea.
1 or 2, 7 or 8?
She just indicated she didn't know.
Okay.
So am I understanding this to say that because you're the one that set up the shoot, that they might have your name, so it says attention Megan?
Right.
Okay, that's what I'm.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, I
trying
mean,
to
if we're
clarify.
communicating on other things, I mean, as I'm sure happens in life, you just kind of go with that point of contact.
I have one just real quick follow-up. What's confusing me too is the bills from, I believe the bills from Strategy and Media, and you can clarify, are for the airtime. Well, withdraw my question because there's production things in there too, so I apologize.
Ma'am, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mr. Hicks, you'd like to call your next witness?
Rob Sikora?
Hold on, for the commission, the hour is 12 o'clock. We're going to be ending for today's session at 3. What is the commission's pleasure for to just keep going, or some type of 30-minute lunch break or anything like that?
I think we're
We've
going
got the
to,
next
my
3.
my preference would be let's go until like 1 o'clock, take a short break for the restroom, and then come back and finish the day. I don't know how everybody
Anybody
else.
else?
That's fine with
Yeah,
me.
that's fine with me.
I think we should also check with council, because having practiced with 2 diabetics, have a heightened awareness that everybody is not necessarily able to just go through lunch.
Right.
So,
I'm at an age where I need food less than I need other breaks.
So we're okay to proceed, take a short recess in the middle of this, just to use the restroom and then get back to it? Okay,
And get candy bars.
thank you.
Rachel went to get it. Yeah, hey, Bill, Rachel.
Quarter's doing okay? Okay. If you need something, holler.
No.
is there really such a
Lots of good
There's a
candy.
seat right there between the council tables, if you would sit there.
on
That'd be
just
sworn.
days?
Thank you.
With the fridge bar and everything, that's like you can't, I mean, that's not, act like that's not.
That's what they have. And those are
Just
the-
a lively color.
It tastes so good.
If you would
Oh,
be
it needs to be
sworn,
sworn.
yeah, if you would be sworn by the court reporter, we'll be able to proceed.
You swear to affirm that the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
If you would, sir, I'm partially deaf, so speak up so that we can all hear you,
Oh,
okay?
yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Now, I'm gonna stand over here, because I know we're trying to figure out the best way to not cause people to have a neck problem from spinning their head around.
Yeah.
But there might be some exhibits. So Mr. Secor, and I apologize, I couldn't pronounce your last name.
C-car, like a car that drives on the
Secor,
sea.
okay. So, what was your role during the 2020 Republican primary?
Executive Director of the Ohio Republican Party.
What was your specific role related to the 2020 Republican primary, or roles?
As like job description, just trying to.
Not really job, but related to the primary in 2020, what were your specific roles, like, coordinating field volunteers, whatever were your specific roles?
I mean, as executive director, I ran the day-to-day operations that involved, overseeing the political department, finance department, accounting, communications, and each one of those departments had a different role in the primaries, but helping, for the most part, generally speaking, helping endorse candidates.
Helping endorse candidates?
Correct.
And when you say endorsed by who?
The committee, the Ohio Republican Party.
Okay. Where do you still work for the Ohio Republican Party? If not, where do you work now?
I work for Main Thinking for Ohio.
Would you describe yourself as well familiar with the structure of the Ohio Republican Party and supervision of its resources during that primary period?
Yes.
Would you characterize yourself as being well familiar with campaign finance reporting requirements, including in-kind reporting?
For the party, yes.
Help expand on what you mean by the qualification of for the party.
We can go through it later, but it's, I have more experience on the party side of compliance issues and in-kind contributions than I do on the candidate side.
So if the party did something that the candidate needed to report as an in-kind, wouldn't you have to know what the rules were for candidates in order to know what the rules were for the party?
It's the candidate's responsibility to file their campaign finance disclosures.
Now, we could look at exhibits out of Mr. Bray's exhibits, but it appears that there were a lot of communications to candidates of what in-kind expenses they should be reporting from the ORP.
Well, sure,
We could
yeah.
look at those documents, so.
As part of our compliance, we would have to notify candidates or elected officials if we were giving them an in-kind contribution. So to that extent, yes, very much so.
Okay, so you're saying that it's the candidate's ultimate responsibility to file their report, but the Ohio Republican Party provides specific information to candidates on what that candidate should report as in-kind coming from the Ohio Republican Party.
Yes, the party is required to notify candidates when an in-kind contribution occurs.
As an aside, are you aware of any notification of an in-kind ever given to Alan Freeman?
No.
And, okay. What was your relationship with R.J. Mancini?
I wouldn't say we had one. I've talked to him once or twice.
Okay, so in what context then did you talk to him?
I'm having a hard time. It would have probably been over a conference call or something like that, but, generally speaking, I wouldn't say we had one, a relationship.
So what was his role in the 2020 Republican primary?
He was a House campaign manager, worked for the HRCC.
For the HRCC, okay. And was that for specific candidates, or what was?
Oh, no, it was for the HRCC. They would have been in charge of the day-to-day operations and which campaigns he was working for.
So who's that? Who are the individuals that are the HRCC that will be responsible for that?
At the time, for the speaker's team, that would have been, we worked with Jeff Longstreth, Megan Fitzmartin, Tommy Rawls.
So the HRCC was Jeff Long's, people within, principals within the HRCC were, I want to get this down right, Tommy Rolfe?
Tommy Rawls, or Rawls.
Rolfe, yeah.
Can I interject just one thing? The HRCC stands for?
The House Republican Campaign Committee, I believe, at the time. It's changed a couple of times, so.
It has. I
Off on the
understand,
last
but at
two
the time
seasons,
it was that.
That was my understanding, yes.
You said Tommy Rolfe, Jeff Longstreth, was there another name you said?
Megan Fitzmartin.
Megan Fitzmartin. So you're saying those individuals, to your knowledge, work for the HRCC?
Correct.
Okay. Did you review party and HRCC finance filings in your role as executive director of the ORP?
Party filing, but not HRCC.
Okay. Okay. But RJ Mancini, to be clear, who was he paid by?
The Ohio Republican Party.
But his management was provided by these HRCC people, as far as you know?
Correct. Day-to-day management, yes.
Okay. So, I want you to look at, it's going to be my exhibit 10B. So, do you recognize this document?
Yes, I signed it.
Okay,
Sorry.
so yes, okay. Can you read the second paragraph?
Are we talking on my?
Yeah, it kind of messes up in what I handed you, Rob. It has like the last page of.
Yeah, the last-
It's the last page of what I handed you.
And just stop me if I'm on the wrong part, but the Ohio Republican Party did not specifically assign RJ Mancini or any other person to specifically work or volunteer on the Gene Schmidt campaign for state representative in the March 2020 Republican Party primary election.
Okay, so what did the Ohio Republican Party specifically assign RJ Mancini to do?
We in-kinded his payroll as well as some other employment, benefit stuff as an employee, and it's a service we provide to both caucuses, the Senate and House caucuses. And then his job was House campaign manager, and he was there to manage House campaigns for endorsed candidates.
Okay, so the HRCC was only supposed to be using the resources for endorsed candidates?
Correct.
And the HRCC, to your knowledge, involved, or not necessarily all of them, but Tommy Rolfe, Jeff Longstreth, and Megan Fitzmartin were the HRCC at the time?
Correct.
Okay, and did you get any reporting from RJ Mancini of what he was doing?
No, as I said, the day-to-day management was up to the HRCC. In conversations with Jeff Longstreth and Megan Fitzmartin, we would have general updates about the campaigns, but nothing specific to RJ is coming to mind.
Okay. When in your paragraph you read, it said, we did not specifically assign RJ Mancini or any other person to specifically work or volunteer. Did you instruct people to volunteer on campaigns?
No.
So why did you put that word in there?
I think that there was, just to be clear that we did not do that either.
Okay. So were you ever aware of resources that were volunteering for campaigns?
No.
Okay. So there's were there other people like RJ Mancini that you, that were in this deal where the HRCC was managing them?
Yes.
Can you remember any of those people?
Off the top of my head, no, but there would have been 7 to 8, maybe 10. So,
7 to 8 or 10?
yeah, 8 to 10. That's fine.
Okay, so somewhere between 7 or 10.
Yeah. Probably.
Thereabouts. I'm not asking for a precise, but you can't remember the names? Can you remember the names of any of them?
Off the top of my head, no, I'm sorry, cannot.
Okay. And you said you barely talked to RJ Mancini, but when you did talk, what did you talk about?
Like I said, I think it may have been on a conference call with all of those individuals, and it would have been just kind of directions for what they, their job responsibilities. And, probably would have been it was early on, when we brought them on about, knocking doors, making phone calls, that kind of stuff.
So what were RJ Mancini's job responsibilities that you communicated in those conversations?
I kind of went through it a little bit, but it was mainly door knocking and phone calling for endorsed candidates.
For endorsed candidates?
Yes.
So, you know where RJ Mancini, I don't know if he lives there now, but where he lived at the time?
My understanding was Southwest Ohio.
Okay, so he lives very close, I don't know if he still lives there, but he lived very close to my house in Claremont County, but, so why would you have a field worker that was supposed to only be working for endorsed candidates in a region where neither Alan Freeman or Gene Schmidt were endorsed candidates of the Ohio Republican Party?
I think like a lot of people in Claremont County, you can drive to Hamilton County to work every day. It's fairly common.
Were you aware of him doing that?
Not specifically, no. But we had endorsed candidates in Hamilton County, and briefly Claremont County, as well as, counties in surrounding areas. So it's not uncommon for our folks not to live, like, for instance, when I worked for the party, I lived in Kentucky, but worked in Lebanon.
What was the relationship between JPL and Associates and the Ohio Republican Party during this period of the 2020 primary?
I worked with them in their function as, part of the speaker's team in the HRCC.
What would you say was the difference between, or how would you explain the difference between the HRCC, JPL and Associates, and Constant Contact? In your mind?
Well, so I can't really speak to any of those organizations, but it was our understanding that those folks were in charge of the HRCC.
Okay. What's your relationship, if any, with Stephen Caraway?
Let's see, I believe he might have, I met Steve, it was after the primary in 2020, when we were doing the general election campaigns, is when I first met Steve.
Based on your knowledge of field workers, now you're saying that this person was in the HRCC and not you and so forth, but is that the work done for candidates that's being compensated, that, and I don't want to put any words in it, but that's supposed to be reported by the candidates as an in-kind contribution?
Well, it wouldn't be from us because we were in-kinding it to the HRCC.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
It wouldn't be from us, it would be because we in-kinded those services to the HRCC.
Sure. So I'm gonna use one of Mr. Richter's exhibits. I'm looking for the.
Mr. Richter, you have
I don't think I have any.
Not the. I'm sorry.
It's all right. Do a variety of things.
I'm
but
gonna
really don't take
I'm
5
gonna put it
minutes.
here, but it's Mr. Bray's
I'm sorry, what are you looking for?
exhibit M of yours.
There is a white notebook there with tabbed exhibits for the witness. You can give the witness that. Oh, right, good. Cool.
So M and Mary?
Yes,
Is this Emma's and Mary?
yes, M
Thank you.
and Mary.
Probably not the computer.
So when you flip through into exhibit M, there's documents in there that are from Tom Danes and what's your relationship with Tom Danes?
Tom Danes was is the accounting and operations director at the Ohio Republican Party, and he reported to me.
Okay, and then these pages that are like little letters back here, those are Tom Danes reporting to people what they should be. I'm not as familiar with this, but it's not my.
Yes, so when we, when we make any kind of contribution to a candidate, we send them the letters like you can see in the exhibit.
Okay, so on one of the pages, it's the one that says February 28th. It has things to attribute to the HRCC. So it's the one, it has two tables at the bottom of it. It's like, I think it's still part of it now.
Yep.
Okay, you see that one? Everybody see like the one that has
It's
two
a letter
tables?
to friends of Mark Fraser.
Okay, so this is Tom Danes, right?
Yes.
And he's reporting both ORP contributions and HRCC contributions to a candidate, right?
It appears so, yes.
So do you want to help me understand better how the Republic ORP was involved in reporting HRCC expenses to in-kind contribution expenses to candidates? Because it looks here like it did.
Yeah, I mean, it appears that that is something that Tom did for those candidates, yes.
So as executive director, you were just unaware that the Ohio Republican Party was also informing candidates of in-kind contributions from the HRCC?
That is what I'm saying, yes.
To the best of your knowledge, Tom Danes would have received that information from the HRCC?
Just based on the exhibit you're showing me, it looks like he worked with them, yes, to provide that to the candidates.
Okay, so there, I don't want to, okay, so I just want to correct that there was, you might not be familiar, Rob, with what exactly, but there, based on this, there was some connection between the HRCC and the ORP in terms of in-kind reporting. So they weren't independent functions.
That's what, it appears that is correct, yes.
Okay, and as executive director of the Ohio Republican Party, you were not aware of that happening?
No.
Okay. All right, so let me get back to, trying to remember what stack I pulled something out of. I might have to do a break for me to reorganize my stack of papers. So, okay. You mentioned Tommy Rolfe, Jeff Longstreth, and Megan Fitzmartin. I don't want to be redundant, and I'll keep us moving, but just for my clarification, could you, for each of those people, describe what your, not personal relationship, but your working relationship was with each of them as the executive director of the Ohio Republican Party?
Sure, I mainly dealt with Jeff on matters that were important to the speaker and, on the campaign side of things. My understanding is that Megan and Tommy were involved with managing the House campaign managers. But yeah, most of my interactions were with Jeff.
So if Jeff were having resources being provided by the ORP, if he were using them on non-endorsed candidates, that would have been being done without your knowledge?
Correct.
Okay. And none of your discussions with R.J. Mancini would have revealed to you that that's what he was doing?
Correct.
Okay. Would you think there were other cases where Jeff Longstreth or others didn't communicate to you stuff that was going on with your resources? Or were using them in violation of the stipulations that you had told them?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. So I'm almost done. What was your relationship with Luke Householder?
I don't have a relationship with Luke Householder.
Were you aware of resources that were being deployed on campaigns and being compensated involving Tommy Rolfe, Jeff Longstreth, and Megan Fitzmartin that were not coming from the Ohio Republican Party?
Can you say that one more time? Sorry.
Were you aware of resources that were being deployed by these HRCC people that were not coming from the Ohio Republican Party?
I'm just trying to make sure I've got what you're trying to ask.
I'm not trying to sound a trick question.
Well, yeah, no, that's what I'm trying, like resources from not from the Ohio Republican Party.
Yeah, like were you aware of So I'm gonna give you examples so I can help with clarify the question. But let's say you said you work with Jeff Longstreth, and you might have a discussion about, say, whatever, resources. Did it ever come up that, by the way, we're using resources beyond the resources you gave us on these campaigns?
No, not in the discussions, but it doesn't surprise me that that would have happened.
Were you aware of it happening or not aware of it happening?
Not aware of it happening.
Okay, and do you know Luke Householder at all or not at all?
No, I've never spoken to him.
Okay. And Luke Householder was never compensated by the Ohio Republican Party,
That's correct.
or to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, yes.
To your knowledge, right? And he never shows up on any campaign stuff, so, like RJ Mancini does. Okay. So so those, I think that's all the questions I have.
Mr. Bry?
Thank you. Let me assume the position. Mr. Seacar,
Yes.
is it accurate to say that the Ohio Republican Party did not specifically assign R.J. Mancini, Luke Householder, or any other person to specifically work or volunteer on the Freeman campaign in 2020?
Yes, that's correct.
And in general, field workers paid by the Ohio Republican Party, do they need to be reported as in-kind contributions to specific candidates?
No, we report those to the HRCC.
And in fact, if you take a look at the white notebook, at exhibits R, S, and T, take a look at exhibit R.
I'm sorry, R?
R as in Ralph. And that reflects some of the reporting by the Ohio Republican Party of in-kind contributions to the House Republican Campaign Committee.
It does.
And similarly in S, do you know what S is?
It looks like a list of in-kind contributions to the HRCC.
Right, and it says in the top left, ORP in-kinds to HRCC.
Yes.
Is that something that came from the ORP, Ohio Republican Party, or do you not know?
I don't know.
Would you take a look at exhibit T as in Tom? Is this another finding with the Secretary of State's office reflecting in-kind contributions from the Ohio Republican Party to the House Republican Campaign Committee?
It is.
And is that the form in which you publicly filed, the Ohio Republican Party, during your tenure as Executive Director, publicly filed reports and notices of in-kind contributions from the ORP to HRCC?
Yes.
And during your tenure as Executive Director of the ORP, the Ohio Republican Party diligently tried to report all of its in-kinds appropriately.
Yes, sir.
Did the Ohio Republican Party ever give a notice to the Alan Freeman campaign of any in-kind contribution from the Ohio Republican Party to the Alan Freeman campaign during your tenure? Did the Ohio Republican Party during your tenure ever send invoices to the Alan Freeman campaign?
No.
Have you ever seen a bill or invoice sent to the Alan Freeman campaign?
No.
Have you ever seen an in-kind notice sent to the Alan Freeman campaign committee?
No.
Would you agree you can't report what you don't know?
Yes.
Nothing further.
Mr. Hicks, any redirect?
I do, and for a very quick redirect. Did you make Tommy Rolfe, Jeff Longstreth, and Megan Fitzmartin aware that your resources were only to be used on ORP endorsed candidates?
Yes.
Okay, and so then it would be your belief that they didn't follow your instructions and used some of those resources potentially on other candidates?
Not to my knowledge, no, I did not.
Okay. And just, I appreciate Mr. Bray taking you through stuff, and I appreciate those clarifications. I just want to clarify something that's particularly pertinent to this case. Luke Householder was never part of any of this.
Correct.
It was, Luke Householder was unknown to you as being a resource, so you could not have reported him because he was outside of any system that you were involved with.
That's correct.
Okay, nothing further.
Any questions from any commissioners?
I've got one. On the Exhibit T, Mr. Bray's Exhibit T, it shows in-kind contributions from the ORP for payroll taxes and insurance. Who are those payroll taxes and insurance for?
So this looks like it's a little later than what we were talking about earlier,
Okay.
but it would have been House campaign managers for the general election.
But do you all identify who those individuals are that you're paying those payroll taxes for?
I believe that it is on the expenditure side of things, for probably ease of compliance and reporting. They just roll it up into one for each payroll period.
But you would still have a list of,
Oh, yes,
of
absolutely.
employees that are being paid, that you were paying their payroll taxes and insurance for?
Yes. I just can't remember them off the top of my head, sorry.
Any further questions? I have a question. Was Mr. Freeman an endorsed candidate of the Ohio Republican Party?
No.
Any other questions?
May I?
Go ahead, Mr.
Could
Rickman.
you explain the relationship of the ORP to the HRCC and how you interacted with them and any direction that you gave explain the relationship between the ORP and the HRCC?
Yeah, I mean, we worked pretty closely together. Obviously, the goal of both organizations is to get Republicans elected. So, we help each other whenever we can. Jeff and I would talk on a fairly regular basis about how campaigns were going. Obviously, we would provide resources where we could, and, the in-kind contributions to the HRCC. So, we work together as a team.
Did you offer any direction to the HRCC as to how they went about conducting their business?
I guess direction seems broad, but we would talk about strategy and things like that, yes. But, I mean, they didn't work for me, so directing is probably a little harsh word. So.
One of the concerns here is obviously whether there was, as a part of your in-kinds to HRCC, they were used for non-endorsed candidates. That's obviously the question here. What did you do to try and follow up and make sure that that wasn't happening? At the onset, when I'm trying to remember when we endorsed in the primary in 2020, I believe it was February. At that point, I would have told, whoever is endorsed, we can have these folks working for it. They cannot do anything for an unendorsed candidate of the Ohio Republican Party. I was pretty clear and direct with the team, so I didn't feel the need to follow up with them. We worked very closely together and had a good relationship, and there was trust there, and I believed that they were, doing what we had talked about. Okay, I think that's all. Thank you.
Am I permitted to ask one more redirect or not?
Go ahead.
So, because you made me think of something I always said, so originally in Claremont County, there was an endorsed candidate for District 65, which is the two that were put, and then that was repealed. Were there ever any in-kind reports made for Joe Dills in District 65 for activities prior to his endorsement being revoked?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, that's all.
What's your understanding of constant content?
Our interactions with them, they were a mail vendor.
They're what?
A mail vendor, they did direct mail services.
And how about JPL?
As far as I knew, they were, working for the HRCC, and I knew that was it. Years I've worked with them quite a bit, but in their roles as HRCC.
Would you expect or anticipate that either Constant Content or JPL would be putting close to $300,000 worth of media coverage for a non-endorsed candidate?
No.
Are you aware that in fact actually took place?
Yes, they're only based on the
How did you learn of that?
the complaint here. So,
That was the first time you knew of it?
correct.
That's all I have. Anybody else?
I have one cleanup thing.
Mr. Breyer raised his hand. Go ahead,
He
Tom.
can go first. I just.
Well, just because I just want to help you to clean up something that you might have misspoke. So Constant Content was a media vendor?
Mail.
Okay, hold on. I think you can stick with that, but I think a Mighty Group was the mail vendor and Constant Content was the TV media vendor. But if you have your understanding is that Constant Content was a mail vendor, then, okay, that's your understanding.
Yeah, that, for the ORP, our, you know, interaction with constant content at a company was for direct mail
Okay.
services. They may do other stuff, but.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Breyer?
Just as a clarification, I understood from your response to some questions from Commissioner Tavares that you had the details on specific candidates that the field workers were working on. Are those details part of what is publicly filed, or was publicly filed in your tenure by the Ohio Republican Party with the as part of their campaign finance statements or not?
No, it is not.
That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you guys, appreciate it.
Mr. Hicks, your next witness?
I'm going to go out of order from what I planned, just because I think we can wrap it up, this person up by one, so you're taking a break. But I want to call R.J. Mancini.
You want me to go? You got everybody?
Ready?
Mr. Hicks, are you ready?
Yes.
You may proceed, sir.
And I'm trying to go fast. I was talking to some witnesses in the hallway just about their schedule and trying to let people know the timing of things.
Appreciate that.
So I want to be quick with you, RJ, as quick as we can, to respect you all the sitting out there. So if you just describe for me your...
First of all, we need to sort the witness in.
Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you give today will be the truth and the truth and nothing but the truth?
Mr. Mancini, you seem soft-spoken. Make sure you speak loudly so we can all hear. I'm partially deaf. I want to hear what you have to say, okay?
I'll try.
Thank you.
Yep.
So what, you were compensated by the ORP, correct?
Yeah.
For your work, and everything I'm going to talk about is the March 2020 primary campaign. So you were compensated by the ORP in that campaign.
I believe that the campaign was the April 28th campaign.
We timed work, it was still March 17th on April 28th. You didn't read the Secretary's speech. Yeah. So I'm talking about the primary, but so we've established you were paid by the ORP. Who from the ORP did you take direction from?
No one from the ORP.
Okay. Who did you take direction from?
Tommy Rolfe would send me a walk book, and then I would just do that walk book. Other than that, no direction.
Okay, and who did Tommy Rolfe work for?
I don't know that.
I'm gonna have you look at, it's gonna be Exhibit 9. There's one right in front of you there, RJ. So this is, you might recognize this, these are emails from your Discovery production committee. You recognize them? It's not all of them, but do you recognize these?
I don't remember each email, but I look.
Okay. So these are emails that you received from Tommy Rolfe giving you direction. Generally speaking, I'm not trying to direct you and others direction.
Yep.
And on every email, what does it say Tommy Rolfe's title is?
Deputy Political Director.
And then what does it say right below that line?
JP&L and Associates, LLC.
So when I asked you a second ago, who did Tommy Rolfe work for, you said you didn't know.
I didn't know. I'm not going to try to guess. I didn't know he worked for JP&L.
So when you were repeatedly getting emails from somebody that had their title and company at the bottom, you didn't know who they worked for?
This was over a year and a half ago. I didn't remember what they said.
Okay, what was the extent of your interact with Tommy Rolfe? Like, did you talk with him a lot, only get emails from him?
We talk weekly, and then, other than that, just pretty much the emails that I sent over to you.
Okay, and the other people that are copied on here, I'm looking at, in the set I gave you, it says 167 at the bottom, and it's an email from March 12, 2020 at 11:31 a.m.
Just so we're clear, it references House District 42, House District 65, and House District 76,
exactly,
correct?
Okay, and I'm just concentrating, I just picked that one random, I just had my thing turned to that one. So there's a set of people of which you're one of them, that is sent to. You know who those other people are?
I do.
So could you just run through that list and tell me who you think they are? If you don't know one, say you don't know them, but who they are and how you knew them.
The first one, Brandon Henderson, he was the campaign manager for Representative Brindell at the time, and RJ Mancini 5 is myself,
Were you the campaign manager for somebody?
for Alan Freeman. The Matthew T, I'm not sure. Ryan Quinn 488 is Ryan Quinn, he was Representative Frazier's campaign manager. Will Armbruster was Representative, or then candidate Langton's. And then Luke J. House 23 at gmail.com. I am assuming that was Luke Householder.
Okay.
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my assumption.
Okay. Of those people, now, do you work like as a legislative aide to a state rep or anything like that? In your past or present?
I do, currently.
Okay. Are there other people on this list that also work as legislative aides to state reps?
Yes,
Who on this list are you aware of? Just the ones you're aware of that work also as legislative aides for state reps?
Brandon Hendrickson and Ryan Quinn.
Okay. What was your relationship with Luke Householder?
I had no relationship at the time, and then they said, hey RJ, we're gonna send Luke Householder down for you, so to show him how to walk and door knock.
Okay.
And then that was the extent of it.
Okay. You said when we went through the list that you were the campaign manager for Alan Freeman. Can you describe what your duties were as the campaign manager for Alan Freeman?
I would door knock, they would send me the walk books, I would hit that walk book, that neighborhood, try to get them to put in an Alan Freeman for state rep sign, and that was it.
Did you maintain his or any other candidate's Facebook or social media accounts in any way?
I was put on Representative, or then candidate Gene Schmitz, and then I never posted it for Gene, I believe, and that was it. It was on Gene Schmidt's Facebook.
Of the time you spent, would you say you spent almost all of your time on Alan Freeman, split time between Alan Freeman and other candidates? How would you characterize how you spent your time?
The vast majority of my time on then candidate Freeman's.
Other than Alan Freeman, what other candidates did you work for during that primary?
I door knocked for then candidate Schmidt once or twice.
Okay. What's your relationship with Stephen Caraway?
He was one of my contacts for campaign.
What kind of discussions would you have with Stephen Caraway or meetings?
We would just discuss just what I'm hearing from people when I talk to them at the door. He asked me where I've been hitting recently, if certain areas pro Freeman or pro another candidate. And that was it.
Okay. Were you aware that, I'm going to say this just the right way, were you aware that Alan Freeman was not endorsed by the Ohio Republican Party? aware that as an Ohio Republican Party resource, you were only supposed to be working for endorsed candidates?
I did not.
Did you say I did not?
I did not,
Thank you.
sorry.
Did anybody, so nobody in the ORP ever communicated with you that you were only supposed to be working for endorsed candidates?
No, sir.
Were you aware of that whether Gene Schmidt was endorsed by the Ohio Republican Party?
I was not.
You were not
I was
aware?
not aware.
So you don't know that she was not endorsed? Or do you know that?
I know. I knew Joe Dills was endorsed, and then he had a poll, and I can't recall if she was or not. That was over a year and a half ago.
So what was the job description that you were given by the Ohio Republican Party?
The Ohio Republican Party did not give me a job description.
Okay. Did you ever discuss, well, how frequently did you talk or meet with Alan Freeman?
We talk weekly.
How often did you meet?
Bi-weekly, I would say.
I always get confused on that. That means every 2 weeks you would meet, or
Yeah, I mean, it's not
like every other week you would meet?
Correct.
Okay, versus twice a week. Okay, so every other week. When you would meet with Alan Freeman, who else would be present?
I can't say for certain a specific person. I know Caraway was there once or twice.
How many total meetings during the cycle do you think you had with Alan Freeman? So I can characterize that if Caraway was there once or twice, what percent of the time Caraway was there?
I can't recall how many meetings, and
More than 10, less than 10?
I would say around 10 is pretty close.
Okay, did you, during the course of this time, being in the same area, you said you were told that, I believe you represented that you were told Luke Householder was coming down, and where did Luke Householder live during that period?
I believe the Days Inn
Okay, where did you live during that period?
at my parents' house.
Okay, and how much time did you spend with Luke Householder outside of door knocking and other specific campaign activities?
None.
None? So I remember, I just want to clarify with you, because I don't, I met Luke Householder at a Republican Party function at RJ Cinema, which you're probably familiar with. Were you there also? I can't remember if you were there with them also.
I was.
You were, okay, so at least that event you were with him.
Yeah.
But other than that, you didn't have dinner or hang out or?
No, sir.
Okay. Now there, we could find the exhibit, but there's pictures, candidate Freeman, they had you guys standing together, we're going door knocking, the type of stuff you put on social media. So those were more or less, didn't represent any, that you spent a lot of time together, it just was everybody to line up and take a picture and then we'll go our separate ways.
Correct.
Okay. What's your relationship with Rob Secor?
I don't know who that is.
You don't know who it is?
No, sir.
Have you ever had any conversations with Rob Secor?
No.
Who in the Ohio Republican Party hired you?
I don't know that answer.
You don't know who hired you? Who gave you any, who in the Ohio Republican Party during that period did you know at all?
No one.
No one. So explain to me how you get hired, because I want to find this out for myself. You get hired to a job where you don't know anybody that hired you. How did you even know you were hired?
I don't know that answer.
You don't know the answer as to how you knew you were hired for a job?
They asked me to do the campaign. I said yes, and that was
Who were they?
Tommy Rolfe was the one that called me and asked me to do the campaign door knocking.
So Tommy Rolfe is the one that, did he make you an offer to come to work doing campaign door knocking?
I don't believe it was an offer. He said, hey, we would like for you to go on the campaign trail.
Who talked to you with how much it would be paid?
I didn't have a discussion with anyone about that.
Who did you submit what is the one you do like a W-2 to?
I don't recall. That was over a year and a half ago.
Okay, so you don't recall having any discussions ever with Rob Secor?
No.
Okay, I'm gonna play a video for you, RJ. And it's my exhibit, it's number 24. And I just want you to video. And I might pause it a couple times here. Do you recognize that vehicle?
Those householders car.
This is not an exhibit number.
24, it was 24 in my set.
I must have missed that.
Yeah.
So sorry.
So you recognize that as Luke Householder's
Vehicle.
truck or whatever it is? Okay. So you recognize, same truck?
Yep.
By the way, I'm gonna pause there for a second. Now, we went quick there, but did you recognize the location from what you saw so far or not?
No.
Okay. Do you recognize that person?
That's Luke.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part.
Luke Householder.
Thank you.
I think if you show them the still of Exhibit 24, that might help them recognize.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's true. I didn't actually, if you could show them that, Don, because I didn't print that page out and what I brought with me. So this is just shows them pulling out of the parking lot, so. Yeah, on the cover sheet I had for Exhibit 24, there's a still picture from this. Okay, so you can see, and it's here too, it's on the screen. So do you recognize?
I believe that's the Days Inn in Eastgate, Ohio.
Okay. So this is not a serious question, but I hope you've never stayed at the Days Inn in Eastgate, Ohio. So okay. Did you and Luke Householder ever talk about, you know, who was paying for him to stay at the Days Inn?
No,
Okay. So you have no knowledge of who was paying for him to stay at the Days Inn?
I don't know.
So you never developed any friendship or camaraderie with Luke Householder?
We were friendly with each other, but I was there to do a job and make friends.
Now, when there was other than voters, you wanted to make friends with voters. So when you were door knocking and getting this direction from Tommy Roll, did you and Luke Householder then decide who was going to cover what, and who decided how you were going to split up the door knocking for Alan Freeman?
I would get the walk books and I would try to figure out what's the best walk book for the day for us and where we needed to go, and we would ride together and I would drop them off at a certain point. I would park my car and then we would meet back up, and that was the extent.
And was it your understanding he was doing this work for free or as a volunteer, or being paid?
I didn't ask.
You didn't ask, okay. Who told you that he was going to come and do this work?
I don't recall.
So you don't recall Tommy Rolfe, one of the people you mentioned, that gave you supervision?
I would assume Tommy, but I'm not gonna say that, but if I had to guess, I wouldn't guess.
Okay, and then, I'm gonna look real quick here, because I'm almost done, I just wanna make sure I don't leave something on the table. In Exhibit 24 of mine, 24, oh, I'm sorry, I said totally wrong exhibit number. It's Exhibit 2, which is my original affidavit. So in exhibit, that page, I'm looking at it says page 6 in one of the two affidavits. It's the one with the picture of them all standing together. This is like I'm almost done, so I'm just looking over your shoulder at this. So those people in that picture, you know, can you kind of call out who they are? From left to right?
First one is Luke Householder with the hat on. And the second one with the hat on and the glasses is myself.
Okay.
Other than that,
You don't know those?
I don't know those other than Alan at the end.
So who were those other people then, or what was the context of that picture, if you didn't know them?
I can't recall, that was over a year and a half ago. I'm sure they were friends of Alan, or I'm not gonna guess though, but.
Was it, do you think that you went from there to go door knocking? Do you remember? That's what the post implies, that we were going door knocking.
Yeah, I believe I went door knocking after that.
Okay, and those people, who directed them as to where to go door knock? If that's what they were there for.
I had Tommy create extra walk books, and I gave them the walk books.
So you were the one telling those people where to go door knock, but you don't know who any of the people were?
Correct.
Okay. I think that's the only question I had of that. What's the HCRC? Did I say it right? Correct me if I'm.
HRCC.
HRCC.
Question?
Yeah, what's the HRCC?
House Republican Campaign Committee campaign.
Okay, what was their role in relation to your working for Alan Freeman?
I don't know.
So did anybody ever represent themselves to you as representing the HRCC, if I said right?
Not that I recall.
Did anybody ask you for any reporting for purposes of candidates being able to report in-kind contributions of where you were spending your time?
No.
Okay. And I just want to make sure I'm correct on this. The only two candidates you worked for were Alan Freeman and Gene Schmidt?
Correct.
Okay. Did you ever discuss with Alan Freeman, you know, it could be banter, it could be whatever, his TV commercials?
I can't recall.
You can't recall whether you discussed TV commercials with the candidate you were supporting?
Over a year and a half ago, I can't recall if I made a joke or talked about his.
Did you see his TV commercials?
Yes, I live in Fireman County.
Okay. How frequently would you say those TV commercials ran?
Can't recall.
A lot, a little?
Not any more than any other commercial.
Okay. I'll just leave that because I don't know what that means, any other commercial. Did you ever talk with Alan Freeman about his direct mail?
No.
Did you ever see his direct mail pieces from the campaign versus from receiving it in your personal mail?
No, I never saw the direct mail. All I saw was the lit that I gave to the candidate or the voters.
And where did you get that literature from?
Alan had some, Caraway had some, and then they would just say, hey, do you need any more lit? And I'd say, yeah, and then they would give me a box or two. And I'd
If
go,
you were guessing between, it sounds like you had a little bit of a, you know, directing, like Lou, a little bit helping them to know what, in those other people. If you were guessing how many pieces of literature you gave away, just order of magnitude.
I would
in your
object,
work.
I would object to asking the witness to guess. That's not a proper request.
Sustained?
If you would estimate, how many pieces of literature do you believe that were given out as part of the door walking program that you were involved with?
So how many pieces of lit I gave to a
No,
voter,
you
correct?
said you gave people packets for them to go give out. So, and you split up with Luke Householder who was going to cover what? So I'm asking you for an overall estimate.
How many
As
doors
the
do you
campaign
give?
manager, how many pieces of literature do you think were given out through the door knock program?
My goal, I wanted to hit were 1,000 doors a week, and was there for about 6, 7, 8 weeks, so I would say anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000.
That's you personally or the whole team?
That is me personally. I'm not sure how many doors Luke hit while he was on Alan's team.
Do you think it would be?
I don't want to try to guess how many doors Luke hit, but I know myself was 6,000 to 8,000.
But you represented, you were the one giving Luke his walk list for where he was supposed to hit doors. And you would have some basis of your own of how many doors per day you could hit, so on and so forth. So if you were trying to make an estimate of across all the resources, like you said 6,000 to 8,000 for yourself alone, for the whole team, what would your estimate be?
I would to that. But
Yeah.
that's very, very,
So you did a lot better than the other people.
well, Luke left. He got pulled, so, yeah, I was pretty much the only person on the team.
Okay. I want to play one other media clip and then I think I'm going to be done. Okay, so I appreciate your patience with me. And this is going to be number 25B in my items.
Nick Owens claims he'll represent our values. But if Owens is a true conservative, why do conservative groups reject him? Both Ohio Right to Life and Ohio Value voters won't endorse Nick Owens. And Buckeye Firearms Association denied Nick Owens their top rating. If conservative groups won't support Nick Owens, why should we? Do they know something about Owens' record that we don't? What is fake conservative Nick Owens hiding from us? True conservative Alan Freeman has always represented us. Freeman's protection of the unborn and defense of our values earned him the endorsements of Ohio Right to Life and Ohio Value voters. And Freeman's record safeguarding our Second Amendment rights earned him the highest possible rating from Buckeye Firearms Association. Send someone with the proven record to represent us. Send true conservative Alan Freeman for state representative.
Paid for by the committee to elect Alan Freeman.
Do you recognize the voice that read the disclaimer at the end of that?
I didn't really hear it, but
You want me to play it again for you?
please.
I'm just going to play the end, so just the disclaimer part at the very end. I'll turn it up a little bit too. So you can hear it.
State representative.
Paid for by the committee to elect Alan Freeman.
That, I can't recall who said that.
Okay,
I just want to make sure you said you didn't understand who that was.
Yeah, correct, sorry.
That's okay.
okay, so you don't recognize that voice. Did you hear any Alan Freeman radio commercials like that one in your work?
I'm sure I did, but I don't recall anyone in particular.
Okay. All right, I think that's all the questions I had for you, Joe.
Mr. Caraway?
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Mancini, I understand you held the title of campaign manager of Alan Freeman. Did you have anything to do with creation of the written ads or radio ads or television ads?
No, sir.
What was your duties other than going door to door and doing some phone calls on behalf of the campaign?
I think you hit the nail on the head. That maybe try to get a sign or two here and there, but
What was the purpose of holding that title, of being given that title?
I think it was just to make us feel good and add something to the resume other than just door knocker.
Do you have anything to do with the finances of the Alan Freeman campaign?
No, sir.
Did you ever have anything to do with helping prepare the campaign finance reports of the Alan Freeman campaign?
No, sir.
Did you ever have anything to do with reviewing or receiving invoices to the Alan Freeman campaign?
No, sir.
Do you know how expenses of the Alan Freeman campaign were being paid?
No, sir.
Did you know if there was a plan to pay?
No, sir.
I don't recall whether it was discussed, but there is an email from Constant Contact asking the Alan Freeman campaign to pay $290,000. Have you ever seen that?
No, sir.
Are you aware of, whether you've seen them or not, any other invoices by anybody sent to the Alan Freeman campaign?
No, sir.
Are you aware of any in-kind notices by anybody sent to the Alan Freeman campaign?
No, sir.
I have nothing further.
Mr. Hicks, any
Quick
redirect?
redirect is, he asked you a lot of questions about finances, but the key thing relating that I want to ask you, just to reconfirm, is that you never provided information to anybody about how to allocate you as an in-kind expense, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and Luke Householder, to your knowledge, was not paid for by the Ohio Republican Party.
Correct.
Okay, that's all.
Anybody in the commission have any questions?
Yeah, I do. When were you named Mr. Freeman's campaign manager?
I don't know a certain date, but I know I went to Claremont County early February, first week in February, I would say.
So first week in February?
Yeah, yeah.
And during that time, you would agree, you were under the, I guess, the instruction and the guidance of Mr. Roth from JPL and Associates, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all.
I have a question for you, Mr. Mancini. When you got a paycheck, who paid you?
It was a direct deposit. I never got a physical check. And
Do you know who made that direct deposit? Was it JPL or was it the Ohio Republican Party?
The Ohio Republican Party.
And as we understand it, sitting here as a commission, you took your direction not from somebody from the Ohio Republican Party, but from Tommy Rolfe with JPL and Associates. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's all I have. Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Mancini. Appreciate it.
Hold on, I got one.
You gotta get quicker.
Looking at the exhibits, was that you doing the disclaimer on the commercial?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it, Mr. Bailey?
That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Mancini. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you, guys.
Mr. Hicks, next witness.
Now, you said something about you wanted to take a
We're
quick break.
1:15. Are we now going to
Well, I thought we
take?
already took our little break.
We can, if we don't need a break, I'm cool.
Okay.
I'd like to get as many witnesses done while they're here, so they don't have to come back.
Does anybody in the commission feel they need a break at this time?
Everybody's okay? All right.
All right, let's do it.
So Scott Schweitzer.
Okay. Ron, you gonna get him?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No, I don't need to say it. Jody, needs a break. Speak up.
I won't make it till 3.
Pardon me?
I won't make it till 3 o'clock tonight.
There you go.
I haven't taken any one now. I probably another 34 minutes.
It seems like a good stopping point. Why don't we stop?
That'd be a good time to do it.
Yeah, Carl? Yeah, let's take her a break.
All right, we are taking a break. How long?
15 minutes. We'll go to 1:30.
15.
15 minutes.
It's 15 enough for you. Thank you.
Is that enough?
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Hicks, how many more witnesses do you have?
So, I think you go. What those groups we go through, all the stuff. Yeah, I mean, and I'll look at what
Maybe
else-
do that, and maybe do that first. Maybe do that
Four are
first.
the key
He's
ones.
got 6 more witnesses, so we'll
Four are
probably.
the key ones, and I'm trying to get the ones that I know have more scheduling conflicts done now, so that we
Okay.
can.
Well, yeah, you can release some, I think. You can-
Are you talking about the witnesses that are finished?
Yeah, who are finished or the ones who aren't gonna make it on today.
First of all, we need to check with council to see if he has any intent on recalling any of the witnesses that have called.
That's what I was just gonna ask that.
No.
So Mr. Hicks, any of the witnesses you called are free to leave. And any you don't intend to call today, you can probably release them and tell them the next hearing date will be the 28th.
Okay, and I've told a couple of them that I think there's no chance they're gonna get called today, so.
Who is it that you've spoken to in that regard? I'm just.
Nick Owens, Steve Caraway, Wayne Gates, but I don't know that I plan to call him anyway, but he's here. So, and then my next three are Scott Schweitzer, Dave Ward, which would be quicker, the Secretary of State guy, and then Susan Jones. So I don't know if we want to, those are the three big ones. The two big ones out of three of those. Dave Ward should be quicker.
Well, Jones is here regardless as a representative.
Oh, yeah, okay, so that's not it. So let me see, that's a good point. So if we unbelievably sped up, I'd try to get Caraway, but we'll see how.
Not to put you on the spot, Mr. Brogdon, how many witnesses do you intend on calling?
Well, I intend to have it dismissed as the end of this case, but if that doesn't happen, probably 2 or 3.
I'm just thinking from a timing standpoint.
From a time standpoint,
An hour or two?
yeah, I think in an hour, I can get it done.
Okay.
That means 2.
He is a lawyer.
He's heard the best I would.
I've worked
Are your
around that.
witnesses here today or not?
Yeah, I think they are, yeah.
Is he supposed to share with me who the witnesses are that he's planning to call?
Well, I don't know who the witnesses are gonna be. If he calls
Okay.
Susan Jones, I probably don't need to call her. If he testifies himself, I won't need to call him, for example.
I'm just thinking about timing for our next meeting, that's the only reason I was
Yeah.
asking.
I'm just thinking of the convenience of the parties for the hour and a half left for today.
It sounds like,
And the realism associated with having them hang around when they're gonna have to come back.
understood.
Some of
So
the-
I think that Scott Schweitzer will take some time. So if we wanted to say to try to get Scott Schweitzer and Dave Ward, and then Susan Jones, Stephen Caraway, and the other ones would be the next, then I'd have like 3 left in there. Because I want to also be respectful of people's time that are,
Well, we're here, we intended to go to 3, I say we would keep witnesses, and what we can get through today, we get through today, and then finish up what we need to next time.
I'm just saying that, Commissioner Norman, because I think that the 2 witnesses I mentioned will probably get us pretty close.
It's your prerogative to call who you want to call, so thanks for the courtesy, consideration of time. Let's go ahead and,
I think we're all back.
I think we're all,
Yep.
we're in agreement.
You ready?
Mr. Schweitzer, if you would take a seat here and be sworn.
And for the record, Ron O'Brien, I'm here representing Mr. Schweitzer. I have no reason to believe, based on what Mr. Hicks has represented to me, that there's any reason that I need to be here, but I am.
Thank you. You need to be sworn in first, sir.
Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you'll give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but?
Mr. Schweitzer, my name is Scott Norman, I'm one of the commission members. I'm partially deaf, so if you would, keep your voice up so we could all hear today, okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So Mr. Schweitzer, thanks for appearing today.
Yes.
What's your role in strategy and media, or for that group of companies, if you could just explain what your role is?
In the strategy group and strategic media placement, strategy group companies, I am the chief operating officer.
The chief operating officer, and that is, can you just help me explain, like, what is the structure and what are the, because there's a couple names I see, just what are the structure and what are the entities?
The structure of our companies?
Yes.
There is a DBA of the strategy group, which is seen as doing primarily TV, radio, digital advertising for candidates,
Okay.
as well as strategic media placement, which is a media buying operation. So they will place airtime on behalf of candidates, third parties, organizations, as well as companies and anybody in needing of ad placement throughout the United States.
Okay, so I get the ad placement part, and if I refer to it as SMP.
That's fine.
Then just explain for me again the role of strategy group vis-a-vis SMP.
Vis-a-vis.
I get that SMP as ad placement.
Yes.
I'm trying to better understand what
And
the strategy
the
group is.
strategy themselves, we will write, produce, create, consult on the actual ads themselves, as well as provide strategy for candidates seeking public office.
So strategy group would do, as it comes to ads, would do
They
the
would
production of the ads?
We would do the pre-production, the post-production, any field production that was necessary, as well as any editing, delivering of those spots to the stations, anything on the traditional, what you would think of when you watch a TV commercial. side of things.
Okay, and then what's the operational connection between Strategy Group and S&P?
Sister companies, we, technically, Strategic Media Placement is the parent company of Strategy Group.
Okay, so S&P's here, and Strategy Group is a subordinate to that, or whatever, in filings. And you're the chief operating officer for both entities?
Correct.
Okay, so if I refer to it as, is there a name I could refer to that would be the proper name to refer to the combined entity? Given that you're chief operating officer of both, I want to make sure to use my words correctly.
The Strategy Group companies,
The Strategy
actually,
Group.
technically that's not accurate, I would just say the Strategy Group.
But S&P is the top company.
Correct.
For the sake of today, could I call it S&P, or
Sure.
do you think that was mischaracterizing? Okay.
No, that's accurate.
Okay, so,
I would object. I think that calling it something that is not might be confusing.
Is anybody here confused?
Maybe not yet, but I'm just, there are two groups. The groups, if you do plural, I think they'll know what we're talking about.
why don't we address the confusion when and if it occurs?
Mr. Schweitzer, if you get confused, let us know, please.
I will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, what was the role of S&P in House campaign, Republican House campaigns in the 2020 primary?
In-house campaigns, plural.
Yes, across,
We work for candidates and issues all over the United States.
well, but I just asked you about the Ohio House.
But the Ohio House
Primary for
specifically,
2020.
we were engaged as a media placement arm for candidates.
Engaged by individual candidates or engaged as a group of candidates?
It depends.
What is S&P's relationship to Alan Freeman in his campaign? Everything I'm talking about is in March, in the 2020 primary, Republican primary.
We were hired to place ads on his behalf.
By who?
Through Constant Contact.
Content, it's content, so. Who from Constant Content hired you?
Would have been Jeff Longstreth.
Jeff Longstreth, okay. Within Constant Content, were there people other than Jeff Longstreth that you worked with?
Megan Fitzmartin.
Megan Fitzmartin. Okay, any other Constant Content people that you worked with?
That's who I would have been dealing with on a daily basis.
Okay. What was your relationship with Megan Fitzmartin specific to the Alan Freeman campaign?
She served as the agent for the campaign, authorizing any expenditures as well as approval on messaging.
So she approved messaging, and when she approved the messaging, did she communicate that to you or to somebody else in your organization?
Would be to me.
To you. You also just said that she approved expenditures. Can you help expand on what you mean by she approved expenditures?
We would have budgets, and she would ask for, in this case, Alan's race. What does it cost to run an advertising campaign? I would give her the total, and we would then, as we did with multiple candidates, have discussions on, how many gross rating points you're going to get behind that message, when we would be starting gross rating points. So gross rating point is a unit of measure to allow to allow you to know how much reach and frequency an ad's going to have. Typically, with political candidates, we look for 1,000 gross rating points. What that means is that our target audience of likely voters will see that message on average 10 times. And so it's just a way to look at frequency and repetition. So it takes additional frequency and repetition in order for an ad to be remembered.
So who from Constant Content did you have discussions with on that, about the Alan Freeman campaign?
Would have been Megan and Jeff.
Megan and Jeff, typically together or separately?
I don't remember specifics. I mean, I know I had conversations with both of them.
Okay. Were there meetings with them?
No, it either would have been done either over email or phone.
Okay. Okay, so do you remember any kind of just, I'm not asking for specific numbers, but general dollar ranges that you told Megan Fitzmartin or Jeff Longstreth you thought would be needed to get the number of points that you said, you know, whatever?
Not offhand, I'm guessing, based upon what spots you're clearing at in Cincinnati right now, and I'm guessing it would be around $140, $150 a point in the primary for 2020.
Okay, but I'm making more an aggregate, like, you know, we had a discussion about it generally gonna cost X amount of dollars for this campaign.
Or it would be for a message.
I'm talking the overall Freeman campaign. The overall budget.
I don't recall ever having a conversation about the overall campaign. We would have been talking about kind of one ad at a time, and typically how that works is, you know, either you have a budget that you're dealing with and looking to say, hey, how can we best use these dollars for this campaign, or I'm being told, hey, you have X dollars to spend, what would you recommend doing with that?
Okay, and those conversations then were by individual spot, generally speaking, that you had with Megan and Jeff?
Yeah, I would say.
Like, do you have any, just as an aggregate, like a typical campaign, ad in this campaign, what kind of dollar range would an individual conversation have been about for a specific ad? Just order of magnitude.
I mean, for a state rep campaign, or this race?
This race specifically, the Freeman race.
I mean, it would depend on if you're going up on broadcast TV in Cincinnati, Ohio, or if you're only doing cable in the Claremont County portion.
Specific to the Alan Freeman campaign, do you have any recollection of a discussion about any particular ad and how much it might cost in any?
Ahead of time? I don't remember having that saying, hey, this is what will happen. Through review of emails, I know that we said, hey, you know, what she wants to do, you know, Alan, we're going to do a broadcast TV, what's that going to cost? I guess I'm not necessarily tracking with your
Well,
question.
I kind of, I'll move on, but I'm just kind of asking you, you know, you're talking about these conversations you had, and I'm kind of trying to get at, do you have any recollection, you know, when you had these conversations that it would have been, you know, like it's going to cost $10,000, $5,000, $1,000, just the general order of magnitude
From
of
a
these spots?
broadcast TV standpoint, the Cincinnati, Ohio market, you'd be looking at a minimum of $60,000. Otherwise, 60 at a minimum. Otherwise, I wouldn't recommend going on broadcast TV. And that is if you're doing 15s, there's one station down there, I believe it's XIX, that doesn't allow for half cost on those 15-second spots. They will actually charge you a premium if you're running a 15 and not marrying it to somebody else, or even if you are. I can get in the weeds, I feel like that's what we're
No, I just wanted to get that overall magnitude of what was involved. And now, Megan Fitzmartin, I'm going to make a statement, but I want you to correct me, or so if I understand correctly, she was one of, her and Jeff Longstreth, that's her who would give you approval on ads?
Correct.
Okay, and you said, so part of your company does the production, and part of it does the placement, okay? So can you describe for me the approval of production versus the approval of placement? And was it different, or was it the same people?
It was the same people, and I also would have been involved with that portion of the conversation. Typically, what would happen on a production side is I would get the facts from Megan and or Jeff on what we were looking to accomplish politically. I would provide them then with a script. They would make changes to that script, talk it over with the client, let me know then if that is approved. Once I had approval from them, I would move that to production. I would then send that produced spot to Megan and or Jeff to share with the client. They would let me know if any additional changes were needed, and if they were, we would make those changes and then send it back. And if it was approved, then we would send out typically an invoice for that production. Sometimes it's separate invoices for the buy on that spot, and then how, what are we going to do with it now that we actually have this ad? Is this something we're looking to put up on broadcast TV?
Okay. What was your relationship with Anna Lippencourt?
Anna Lippincott?
Lippincott.
I would speak with Anna on occasion.
Did she have any role in the approval of creative or production or placement?
None.
None, okay.
Not to my recollection.
Now you put, I'm trying to go fast here because of time. I appreciate, I know you have to change your schedule to be here, but So we can go to exhibits, but you provided a set of invoices
Yes.
that were an exhibit, that were to constant content. Who
Yes.
would you send those invoices to?
I don't recall, I would have that information saved. I'm guessing that those went to, they might have gone to Megan and Anna, because Anna would have been on the financial side of things, but she would have only been receiving that. She and I would not have been having
Okay.
conversations about what that amount should be.
Did you send the invoices or somebody else in your organization?
I would send the invoices to my CFO and our accounting team, and either our CFO directly or somebody in our accounting office would then send that invoice to them.
When you did that, so you didn't directly send the invoices to the people, somebody in your accounting department sent the invoices, okay.
But I would give them instructions on what that invoice needed to be for.
Okay. I'm gonna, like, if you look at their stack, I put them, I think, in, not the other stack, the one that's right here. These are the ones I think I would refer to, so,
Okay.
so I'll tell you which one I'm referring to.
All right.
So if you look at number 13, there's 13 in mine. So by the way, just as an aside, did you ever do any production or any placement without the authorization of either Megan Fitzmartin or Jeff Longstreth for Alan Freeman?
No.
Okay. When you were doing these activities, did you ask whether the candidate had approved?
They were acting as a agent of the campaign.
So they represented to you that they were authorized by the candidate to do what they were doing?
Correct.
But I don't know, we'll look at this in a second.
Yeah.
When the commercials were filmed in Claremont County, to my understanding,
Yes,
were you present?
I was.
Okay, and who else was present that you remember there being there?
My team, which would have been my DP, so my director of photography, Scott Myers. They had makeup artists with us. I mean, I don't, do you want to know all the people on the crew?
No,
Okay.
just, but I'm probably more interested in political candidates and otherwise, so Alan, I take it since they were Alan Freeman commercials,
Yes.
Alan Freeman was there.
Alan was there, as was his wife and daughters. Gene Schmidt was there. There were two other candidates there as well. I don't recall
Okay,
them by name.
it's not, so, okay, if you flip in what I handed to you to what's at the bottom is a page number, it's 245, but it's the same invoice you were all looking at earlier that has multiple candidates on it.
Yes.
So this invoice, it has on here for radio production on here.
Yes.
So you guys did radio production for Alan Freeman?
Yes.
How did that get done? Because I take it that wasn't done, the film and TV commercials are different. Was the radio production done at a different time, or how was that done?
So that would have been a script, that would have been a professional voiceover reading that script.
Okay. Were you personally involved with any of that process, or reviewing the creative?
I would have been. I don't recall the ad though.
Okay, I'm gonna recall you.
Okay.
I'm gonna recall you. So I'm gonna play a radio spot from Alan Freeman.
Okay.
And I'll just play it, and I apologize because the commissioners have already heard this because it's 60-second ad, so I can fast forward, but.
Nick Owens claims he'll represent our values, but if Owens isn't true conservative, why do conservative groups reject him? Both Ohio Right to Life and Ohio Value voters won't endorse Nick Owens. And Buckeye Firearms Association denied Nick Owens their top rating. If conservative groups won't support Nick Owens, why should we? Do they know something about Owens' record that we don't? What is fake conservative Nick Owens hiding from us? True conservative Alan Freeman has always represented us. Freeman's protection of the unborn and defense of our values earned him the endorsements of Ohio Right to Life and Ohio Value voters. And Freeman's record safeguarding our Second Amendment rights earned him the highest possible rating from Buckeye Firearms Association. Send someone with the proven record to represent us. Send true conservative Alan Freeman for state representative.
Paid for by the committee to elect Alan Freeman.
Do you recognize that radio spot?
I honestly, I don't, but
Okay.
we do thousands of them
Okay,
a year.
okay.
So, but yeah, I mean, it sounds, I mean, the cadence and the content, it sounds like something that, yes,
We would have done.
Yep.
And that, do you recognize the person who read the disclaimer at the end?
Yes, it's out.
Okay, and was it typical for you when you produced radio spots to have the candidate read the disclaimer at the end?
In order to get candidate rates at stations and be a qualified candidate, the candidate's voice needs to appear on that ad at some point.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
It can either be in the disclaimer or if they read some other part of the ad, but their voice needs to appear on the ad.
Oh, that's new information to me, so I think that's very interesting. So, okay, did you have, well, in those invoices that I handed you, the document 13, which is the ones that you handed over, when I added those up, and I probably messed up on my calculator, but the total of all those invoices was about $248,000 when I added up the individual invoices.
For production and airtime?
Yeah, for everything that's in this packet.
Okay.
Okay, and I might have messed up a little, but I didn't, you know, so, and you can flip through them, but it's somewhere around $248,000 total. The cover sheet that you provided in your discovery attributes $137,982.51 to Alan Freeman.
Okay.
Can you help understand how from these, you know, the difference between the 248 number and the 137 number?
It's 2,500, it's 2,500, 1632, okay. That's invoice 6707, 6707. So I believe it's going to be the first, well, and then invoice 6673. So that sheet does not, well, so that first sheet contains, so page 241 contains invoices on page 242, 243, 244, and then invoice number 6673, 24,000 would have been from page 245. The portion of that 126,000, only, we'll say approximately 24,000 of that is attributed to the Freeman campaign.
So
So
how
that
many
is,
I want
that's
to
the, that's the 24,110.03.
Okay, I just want to be, and I'm just looking at round numbers, I'm not looking to do like a big math exercise here. So if I take that one invoice and I take that $24,000 of it was Alan Freeman, and the other invoices, I'm going to flip through these here. So if I take the total number I added up, and correct me if I'm double adding something in here.
You will be, but go ahead.
Okay, that was like 248 or something like this. All of these other invoices, I guess it's a better way for me to ask the question, Mr. Schweitzer, is all these other invoices were exclusively for Alan Freeman or not?
Well, invoice 6669 on page 245 is for 5 candidates that are listed there.
Yeah, I'm saying other than that invoice.
Okay.
Because I think that's the only one in here that has multiple candidates listed.
Yeah,
All
but-
those other invoices, to your knowledge, are specifically Alan Freeman invoices?
Ohio, yes.
Okay, I would appreciate if you could refer to them by invoice number, because while you guys may
Oh.
have page numbers, I don't have a page number. So
Understood.
if you could refer to them by invoice, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yep, invoice under strategic media placement, invoice 6669. What that was for Alan Freeman, that is the same as invoice 10823. So from an internal accounting standpoint, that strategy group for media invoice, that is strictly for the radio production. So we actually internally move money out of strategic media placement because that is strictly a media placement company, and we're moving that over into the production company.
Okay, so that's how I would be double counting some of these at the back.
Correct.
Because they're, okay. But the point, just to be clear, and I want to move on because I don't want to get into a big math thing, is that other than that one invoice, the
669?
669, all these other invoices were exclusive to Alan Freeman?
Correct.
Okay. Do you ever place media that's not been approved by a candidate?
Do not? Well, unless it's for a corporation or for an entity that is, you know, an independent expenditure apart from that campaign.
Okay, I want you to look at page I'm trying to go fast, but I want to get this stuff, is in document number 02, which is my original affidavit. This is the one you probably, it has a lot of invoices, it has a lot of things from the FCC database.
Yep.
That were Alan Freeman invoices, or combo invoices, not always Alan Freeman, that went to strategic media placement. Are you from?
Technically, they may not have come directly to us. Some of these, we use a program called Strata in order to buy our media airtime. And in some cases, in order to do the accounting, to make sure that everything that is run properly, we actually have to seek out that information, so it's not necessarily sent to us.
Okay.
But
let me ask a different way. Are there any of these in here that you would recognize that were, and I might not ask it right, you can correct it, that were not work that your firm was involved with?
Beginning on what page?
They're exhibits 1 through 6, which are, on your copy it says page 51, on the commissioner's copy, which doesn't have the bottom page numbers, it's the second affidavit, so it's like halfway through. And on that, and it doesn't have a page number, but it's after page 2 of the second affidavit, so the one that has the totals and the invoices listed.
Okay.
So there's a whole chunk of different like invoices and orders on here.
For clarifications, there are attached to Exhibit 2, Exhibits 1 through 4, and also attached as part of Exhibits 2 are additional Exhibits 1 through 4, plus new Exhibit 5 and 6. I assume what we're all referring to are the Exhibits 1 through 6, which are the last portion of Exhibit 2. Am I correct?
Correct. Okay, so those invoices, would you recognize those as being work that your firm was doing with Alan Freeman?
Yes.
Okay. Now there's one in here, and I actually want to ask this because it doesn't say strategy and media on it. Let me find it here. There's one of them that has a different company name on it. And I just want to see if there was a relationship between you and them. Hope I'm not losing my mind here. And I want to say it says like something NDD or something like that.
NCC.
NCC, something
It says national, those are national cable reps.
Okay, now is that, but that invoice, if I could find it, an invoice that says that at the top would also be your firm involved with it or some other firm?
So how some cable companies prefer you place cable is through NCC, which is a national cable repping company.
Okay.
So it's a way to more efficiently purchase cable airtime than going to every single little station or cable outlet.
If anybody sees which one that is.
It's page 72, Exhibit 5.
Yes, all right, there you go. Thank you, I appreciate it. Yeah, so that one, page 72, which appears it's a combination Schmidt and Freeman thing, that would have still been your firm involved with that?
Correct.
Okay, even though the name is different at the top.
Just so we're clear, because ours doesn't have page numbers.
Exhibit 5 on my second affidavit.
It says iHeartMedia.
It says bill to political NCC.
I think it's the second to last page of Exhibit 2.
It says it has an Exhibit 5 tag at the top, so if you see that one, it's the right one. In my original affidavit, the second affidavit, the one that was about media spend, not the one about the council board.
I believe it's the fifth from the end in terms of pieces of paper of Exhibit 2.
There's a couple of them in here, but I just wanted to clarify that those invoices.
It's the one right before the iHeartMedia.
Yeah, it's the one right before iHeartMedia. I just wanted to clarify that even though those have a different company name at the top, those were still things that your firm was involved with.
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to look at number 14. So Commissioner, this is Exhibit 14 in my set. So who is A. Grant Fink?
He is our senior media buyer.
And how often do you communicate with him, or how often do you work with him?
Every day.
Every day? So do you work in the same office, or
We do.
remote? Okay, in a non-pandemic world, you work in the same office. Okay. And so do you recognize these kind of documents?
Oh, yeah, candidate advertisement, disclosure agreement forms.
Okay, so this is,
Typical.
these were filed by your firm, representing that the, if I look at the middle, and there's several of them here, but that the candidate is a legally qualified candidate and the authorized committee is a legally qualified, that the payment for the broadcast time requested has been furnished by Bob. So, from your perspective, these were accurately filed?
Correct.
And you did not know that money was not, I'm not saying it was, but you had no reason to believe any money would not be coming from the candidate?
Well, before, so political advertising, stations will not take political advertising without payment up front. So we are providing this along with the payment.
So that's interesting, because I only one time in my life ever tried to buy something on cable and it was a disaster. But it's become very clear to me that those places will not run any advertising unless they're paid up front.
That's correct. That's correct.
So at the time that you filed these, then you already had the money?
I'd have.
Or you generally would have had the money, or known you would have the money?
Either had the money, or the money was en route, or you were fine. We usually would send these with the buy and the check all at the same time. Is typically how that works.
So I'm not saying your firm did this, but if a firm filed these without having the money, that would not be proper?
It would be unnecessary. It would be strange.
To file these without having the money?
Yeah, because why would you, when it do paperwork unnecessarily?
So when you had got the money for these, so like this one is, what is it, I'm looking for a date on here. So this one is February 14th. Because I'm looking at the first one in that set. February 14th is the date that it was filed. So that means on February 14th, you had money or had money in transit to pay for these, or pay for whatever that was.
Not necessarily, but we wouldn't be placing a buy
without it.
And we wouldn't be doing this paperwork unless we were placing a buy. And we wouldn't be placing a buy unless we actually had money from the client.
So how come, so that when I look back at the other document that has invoices in it, the only invoice, the earliest date on an invoice is February 21, 2020.
Okay.
But correct me, I'm looking back at number 13.
A week earlier.
Okay, so, no, the placement was, A grant digitally signed it on February 14th. The earliest invoice in this stack of invoices is from February 21st.
Okay.
So how could you have had the money if you hadn't even invoiced at that point in time?
We're not placing the buy yet. This doesn't say that there is a buy going with it. This just says that Alan Freeman is identifying the actual campaign. So in order to, the reason why you do this is to qualify for candidate rates.
Okay.
And so, we're saying, Alan Freeman is a qualified candidate, alerting that station of, is he a federal candidate, because rules are different for federal candidates than even state candidates. And so, we're alerting them that we may be placing a buy.
Okay.
And sometimes we may do this just to get rates from stations. They may say, well, if you want candidate rates, you need to actually supply us with an affidavit of,
beforehand,
Typically, we do enough work around the country that people know that we're serious, we're calling them and not wasting time.
Have you ever had a case where you found out after the fact that money that was used for a buy was not coming from the candidate?
No.
Okay, so you never had to go. If you did, how would you handle that?
I'm not sure how that would happen. I mean, I guess to me, we are being told that here's a wire coming into you from the Alan Freeman campaign. Okay, so it's Alan Freeman's money that we're then sending out to multiple stations. So instead of them paying stations directly, they pay us. We split up those the big check into 5 little checks and send that out to stations.
So can you look at that at number 15 in that stack? So this is number 15 in my exhibits. This is your, hopefully do you recognize this as your affidavit?
I do.
So I believe in here you said that Constant Contact paid the invoices, not Alan Freeman.
Correct. They were acting as the agent for the Alan Freeman campaign.
How did you know that?
Because I had multiple conversations with them where they approved Alan Freeman's ads, and like with the radio spot where we need Alan Freeman's voice to be on there, actually got me the file for Alan Freeman. It's, they're acting in a role, what I would classify in a political campaign as a general consultant. So they're essentially the general directing the strategy and overseeing the operation.
So in that case, you would generally trust, as I think I would, that when this is happening and I get the check from Constant Content, that it's coming from the candidate because that's what's been represented to you.
Correct.
Okay, and the people that would have represented that to you were Jeff Longstreth and Megan Fitzmartin?
Correct.
Was Anna Lippencourt ever involved in those representations?
She would not have been the one approving any ads. I would have been sending her invoices once I was told by either Jeff or Megan
Okay.
that things were approved.
So just to make sure I understand correctly, at the time that Megan and or Jeff would approve something, you would be having a conversation to the effect of, this is what you're approving and this is how much it's gonna cost.
Yes.
Would they have also, or did they ask you questions about where is this gonna be placed, how often?
Sure. Some candidates will ask to see the buy and what we are proposing, and the buy would be.
Well, I wanna be specific to this. So
Okay.
you weren't talking to the candidates, so I'm asking for Megan Fitzmartin and Jeff Longstreth to ask you questions about where was it gonna run, how many times, that kind of thing.
No, I don't recall ever having, I mean, other than broadcast TV or cable TV, I don't recall ever getting to the weeds of, oh, hey, we're gonna run CNBC before on the AM
Okay.
rotator, and then ESPN on the weekend rotator, never.
Okay. Did anybody ask you that you saw as being associated with the campaign about where they were gonna be placed, the frequency of placement?
I mean, Jeff and Megan would have conversations on, where they're gonna be placed in terms of broadcast or cable, and what market, and flight dates, and amounts.
Okay, but the things like when TV stations give you, here's a preliminary plan and stuff like that, they wouldn't see that stuff, you wouldn't
They
see it?
could, I don't recall ever sending that to them.
Okay. Okay, so.
I have certain clients I work for that always want to see that. I don't recall Jeff or Megan ever asking for that information before things were bought.
During this whole period, did you have any interaction with Alan Freeman at all?
At the shoot was it?
At the shoot? Did you introduce yourself to Alan Freeman at the shoot?
I've known Alan for, I'll say, a dozen years, maybe.
A dozen years. So describe the relationship you had with Alan over a dozen years?
Just through campaigns in Hamilton County and Cincinnati, his role in Republican politics. I've known Alan for a long time.
Okay, so you didn't need to introduce yourself to him because you already knew each other. How about Megan Fitzmartin? How well did you know her, or how well do you know her? In that period?
I mean, I've been working at that point with Megan for, I'm gonna guess, 3 years.
What about Jeff Longstreth?
I've known Jeff since 1999.
Have you ever had a situation involving them giving you approval where they've had to come back to you saying the candidate did not actually approve this?
Not to my recollection, no.
Would you think they would ever do that?
Objection, how can you know what they will do?
Sustained withdrawal. Okay, so I'm gonna play an ad. There's 2 ads, but for time speed, I'm gonna play one of them, one of the 2 ads. For you, and hopefully you'll be able to identify it. I'm gonna play the short one, so, for sake of time.
A small business owner, a strong conservative, a family man, Alan Freeman will bring these same conservative values to the Ohio House, building business and a better Ohio for all our families. Alan Freeman for State Representative.
Now that's a shorter one. Do you recognize that as
I
a
do.
product of your company?
I do.
And you were present at all of those shooting locations that were, other than the picture, I'm talking the video shooting locations.
Yeah, there was one shot where there's some stuff in the background.
See if we can identify that. Let's go back.
Yeah, that I don't recall being at that shot, but the one before it.
The one in the restaurant?
That's
Not,
not
that's
there.
sorry.
The one at the restaurant, the one with his family, and then the one at the table, yes.
Here's
Yes,
the restaurant one.
yes.
Okay, here's the restaurant one. So do you remember what restaurant that was?
I don't.
Okay. All right, but you recognize this, and you were at least, you were at, let me, so I remember right, you were at the restaurant,
I was.
you were at the house, the, not that house. Not this one.
It was before that.
Oh, I'm going the wrong one. This one.
Yes,
Is that Alan Freeman's house, to your knowledge?
I don't believe so, no.
Do you know whose house it was?
Somebody affiliated with one of the campaigns.
Do you remember which campaign?
I don't, it was somebody else that was there. I don't think it was Alan, though.
Do you remember which other candidates were there? Or any of the other candidates that were there?
Gene Schmidt and, there's a guy with 3 names. It was an incumbent state legislator and another candidate. It was either a friend of Alan's or a friend of Gene's.
So did you, at that time, they were just there to observe filming an Alan Freeman commercial, or were you filming commercials for all of them?
We were filming commercials for all 4 candidates.
Okay, and that'd be quite popular if people showed up just to watch you filming a commercial. And did the commercials for the other candidates, do you remember which ones, did they all get used, not used?
I don't recall.
Okay.
From memory, I'm going to say Alan's was used, and then footage for Gene was used, and the other 2 were not. I believe one of the other candidates wound up dropping out.
Okay.
And not running.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question. I want to play another video. This one falling down here. What was your firm's relationship with Growth and Opportunity PAC or Generation Now or any of those entities?
I believe that we did work for them. I was on the other side of the firewall, so I can't speak to what happened or transpired there.
So what you describe for me, what you mean by the other side of a firewall, or the firewall?
So we have what is called a firewall setup whereby we keep everything separate for sake of not having coordination. So you have different people working on the accounts, you have different media buyers on the accounts, and the only way that I would actually know what was going on there is when things actually became public. So like if they were to place a buy, I wouldn't know that until it actually hit the public log.
What about the production?
What about the production?
Is there a firewall on production?
There would be, I mean, production, it's in some ways like using the post office, but in terms of.
So I'm thinking like if for production, let me give you an example.
We would have a different producer on it, but in terms of like the audio engineer or somebody like that. I mean,
Cameraman, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, there wouldn't be I don't remember their ads. I don't think any of their ads were shot, but they might have been.
So, but in theory, if you were producing ads, not in theory, I was wondering, if you were producing ads for a PAC, like Growth and Opportunity PAC, versus for a candidate, would the video production be separate for those 2 ads? Or the same people doing the video production for both?
How would you define video production?
Filming. Maybe I'm not using the right word. You
No,
probably
I
know
mean,
what-
well, I mean, typically on independent third-party ads that we're doing, we're typically not filming those. Typically, they don't have a budget for that. I mean, I guess sometimes if they do, if you have one of their ads, I can tell you if it was filmed or not.
Well, I'm going to play you an ad.
Okay.
And remember, some of this we can flip back and forth and look at the imagery in the 2 different ads, but I'm going to play, this is Exhibit 23, which I played once before for the commissioners. Okay, so were you present for the filming of any of that ad?
The B-roll imagery that was used, I was present during some of that filming for the B-roll imagery that was used. There is, I'm guessing that typically what happens there is you will pull down that footage. If that stuff is made available online, people pull down footage all the time. There's a famous case with, I think, Mitch McConnell, where there's just, you know, if you're familiar with this, the 60 seconds B-roll of Mitch.
Okay.
Yeah,
No,
so
not
it's,
so.
yeah, I mean, it's just, it's B-roll without any kind of text on screen. Sometimes if we're doing third-party ads, what we will do is, if we don't have that available to us, we will actually find the commercial that they are running and literally lift portions of that. We have a system where we can capture that and then we can put it into our own ad if we need positive imagery of a candidate that we are asking people to support.
So would you describe footage without any, I'm gonna
You
go,
will?
you might know better than terms, so I don't want to say something, but like if I go forward to one of these here, okay, like there, okay?
Yeah.
So when it has this chironing or whatever you call that at the bottom,
Yep.
is that, you know, you start talking about lifting it,
So that would have been put on at post for whoever edited that spot would have done that. So the original footage would not have had any kind of text on it.
So if I go back to the other ad,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't need to do this if we all agree, that the other ad also had the chironing at the bottom.
It was different. It was a orange and blue, and this is.
I'm not talking about the chironing, the look of the chironing, I'm just saying, each of the two sets of that footage had titling down at the bottom. Is there a way to remove the titling so that the footage can be reused? So in order to,
Not unless we could cut and zoom in, like in this example, we could cut and zoom in on Allen and cut that out, but then you also lose quality. by
Okay.
doing that.
when I'm gonna flip back to this other one here, just, and there's a longer one, and I hope not to have to look at it, just so we save time, but back to this one, and I'll look at the restaurant portion of this one. And yet,
A small business owner, a strong conservative, a family man, Alan Freeman will bring these same conservative values.
okay, so the restaurant footage
There you got it.
here.
Strong conservative.
I'm familiar.
Okay, so that was, you were present when this footage was shot?
Correct.
Okay, and would you, and we can flip back and forth, but as far as I can tell when I look at it, I'm not a professional, but they're not the same footage because the camera angle is actually slightly different when it pans across.
It would have been the same shoot, would have been a different take. So,
Okay.
I mean, we don't just take a camera and go by once, I mean, you'll do a dozen.
So how would, again, I'm not in that industry, but is the footage that you don't use from takes, does that become, do you make that publicly available somewhere to people?
Oftentimes we do.
Why?
So that if there's somebody out there that wants to help us, they have imagery that we like.
Describe for me what you mean by somebody helping you.
I mean, if there's someone that wants to alert voters as to the benefits of Alan Freeman and why Alan Freeman is the right choice, if they want to go looking for good imagery of Alan,
That would be somebody like Greg Opportunity Pack,
it would be.
okay? But in your, would the person in your organization, because you described a firewall, doing that versus this, would they get that footage from some independent, publicly available place, or would they get it
No,
directly to
it
the
would
company?
be, I'm guessing it was probably on Alan's website. It may not have been. Okay.
Not so.
It would have been somewhere publicly available, either on a YouTube link or.
I assure you, I've thoroughly scrubbed, and I have never found any of this video publicly available anywhere. So if you are aware of it being publicly available, could your firm would have had to put it someplace?
No, we would have sent it.
I would object to the form of the question.
Yeah.
If Mr. Hicks wishes to testify, you should wait till he's testifying.
Sustained.
So did your firm typically put that footage out on YouTube or other places?
Never.
Did you?
Rarely. We would usually give that to the campaign, to the candidate.
And when, in the case of Alan Freeman, so you would have given the unused footage to what you saw as the campaign?
To constant content.
Which would have been Megan Fitzmartin and Jeff Longstrap. And then they would have, use that footage and come back to your firm for a growth and opportunity spot potentially, or somebody would?
No. No.
So in order for a person to get that footage,
Yes.
they would have to get it from the way you described it. And I want to just make sure I'm very clear. They would have had to get that footage from Megan Fitzmartin or Jeff Longstreth.
No.
Where would they otherwise have gotten it?
Online somewhere. I don't know where Alan Freeman's footage went. Typically there would be an Alan Freeman YouTube page, which would have all of Alan Freeman's ads and may have that as well.
So, okay, I'm not aware of that, but just so I'm clear, your testimony today is that your firm in no way internally shares video footage between the firewall portions that work with PACs versus work with candidates?
Correct.
Okay. And in this case, you would have provided the video footage to Megan Fitzmartin and Jeff Longstreth.
Correct.
Would you have provided it to anybody else? Or do you recall providing it to anybody else?
I don't.
Okay. Okay. So the part of your firm that does, you describe a firewall, and I work at IBM and we have firewalls between people that work with Oracle software and other software companies and SAP and so forth, so I'm aware of like firewalls and organizations. How big are your offices?
Big in terms
Square footage?
Each individual office or the whole
The whole,
campus?
how much of your whole office? Generally speaking.
Oh gosh, the one building is
Pretty big.
large.
So are these firewalls, or the people involved, how are they firewall? Are they like on different floors? IBM, we have them in different offices, so they wouldn't even be in vicinity of each other?
First of all, you gotta have one person speak at a time. You gotta let him finish his question, and you'll get whatever time you need to answer, okay? Go ahead, Mr. Hicks, finish your question if you would.
So my question is to describe from a human capital standpoint, how does your company maintain that firewall?
We have, right now, I'm trying to think if there's anybody in a shared office. We have like 2 accountants in the same office. Technically a mail writer and a TV copywriter in the same office. But we have people in individual offices, and everybody has their own computer. We don't have shared computers.
And I would give you an example, then I'll ask a question. So in the IBM world, you know, we'd have like the people that work with Oracle are in Austin, Texas. The people are San Jose. The people that work with SAP are in a different location. And we could actually go back and prove that they were not communicating with each other.
Once again, I would object to the form of the question.
I haven't asked a question yet.
I would object to the form because he's testifying. And I would ask that he ask a direct question so that we can get the testimony from the witness and not from the question.
Overrule, I think he's trying to get to that. Go ahead, Mr. Hicks.
Right. So is there any physical measures that you take to make sure that this firewall between people is enforced within your offices, such as, you know, this part of the firewall is on a different floor or in a different set of offices, or are those people commingled together?
Everybody has their own office. And, I mean, all of our media buying is on the same floor. All of our creative writing is in the same building. They're all in individual offices, though.
So that they would generally see each other as colleagues?
Yeah, we have offices, Columbus, Ohio. We have 2 buildings in Delaware, we have an office downtown, we had an office downtown at the time, an office in Austin, Texas.
Okay. Have you ever had any measures to, for example, segregate that our PAC people are going to be in Austin and our DIS people are going to be there, so we can always show that we were maintaining a firewall?
We do not. We have internal written policies, and we have annual training on firewall policy.
Okay. So what was your connection or relationship to JPL and Associates?
They were a client.
And who did you deal with from JPL and Associates?
Megan Fitzmartin and Jeff Longstreth.
And what was the difference then between dealing with Megan Fitzmartin and Jeff Longstreth as JPL and Associates versus Content Content?
It's a great question.
I'd love to hear a great answer.
Well, yeah, I mean, there would be many times where I would be confused myself. So just from an invoicing side, oftentimes I would invoice the wrong company. And I would be told, oh, that shouldn't be going to JPL, it should be going to Constant.
Did they ever establish with you any criteria that defined what was JPL versus invoices like this? When you see a dog, it's a dog, it should go to Constant Contact. When it's a cat, it should go to JPL.
I recall having a conversation with Megan where she one time laid out, hey, these are all, it was either JPL or Constant Content clients. And everything should go through that company. But I don't recall specifics as far as, were those state legislative incumbents, not incumbents? Were they folks running for office, for other offices?
So you would think it would more likely be based on the candidate or the particular campaign?
From my recollection.
Okay, versus like PACs went through JPL and candidates went through Constant Content or anything like that?
I don't remember.
So they represented to you that Alan Freeman was a Constant Content client, and thus you build Constant Content for his work?
If that's who we build, then yes.
Okay. Okay. I might be close to done, but I just want to look at something here. I want to make sure I cover my list. In the 2020 campaign, the primary campaign, are you aware of clients who you build, clients related to Team Householder or Larry Householder type clients that you build JPL for their media services versus, or did, as far as you know, they were all billed to Constant Contact?
I don't recall.
Okay. During that cycle, did your firm have, as far as you know, notable billings to JPL for candidates? For candidates in the Ohio primary or Republican primary?
I don't remember.
Okay. When Jeff Longstreth was indicted, did that come as a surprise to you or not?
I was surprised.
From your experience, was he an ethical person to work with?
But I would object. I don't think that the ethics of Jeff Longstreth are, his action might be an issue.
I think the allege that you've made that Constant Content, that things were not authorized when Jeff Longstreth did things without authorization from the candidate would go to whether Mr. Schweitzer has had any issues with the ethics of Jeff Longstreth as it relates to working with.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Okay. Is there anything, any people other than Jeff Longstreth, Megan Fitzmartin, and Anna Lippencourt in the limited role that you described, Lippincott, I might be saying wrong, okay, that you work with from either of these organizations?
No.
Did you ever work with or aware of anybody representing to you that they were the HRCC?
I'm familiar with the HRCC.
As far as it goes, the candidates in the 2020 primary, did anybody ever represent to you that you're aware of that they were representing the HRCC as it related to those candidates in question? Or Mr. Freeman or any other candidates that you're aware of?
Mr. Freeman, no. Other candidates, I don't
You don't.
recall. Because I don't remember the House caucus being involved in any primaries.
Okay. Okay. I think that's all the questions I have. So I appreciate you. I really appreciate it. I know you changed your schedule to be here, so I really appreciate it.
Mr. Schweitzer, a couple things just to clear up. I think there were some questions asked about how the firewall works and how one group of people can be involved in express advocacy for a candidate, where another group of people can be involved in doing independent expenditures, advocating for the same candidate. Was there any strategic communications back and forth about how best to do that?
There's not.
Was there any financial sharing back and forth about how much was going to be spent on independent versus independent?
There is not. The only way that we would have known what that other side is doing is when those actual buys were placed on TV or any public disclosures were made.
And do you know whether or not the Democratic as well as Republican groups commonly post video and still shots that can be used for independent ads for candidates?
It is a very common practice.
Do you know whether or not the Federal Elections Commission has in fact promulgated standards on how to make sure that you have a good farm?
They do, and we follow those standards.
Is it also the case that if independent video or audio or stills are posted, that people who oppose that candidate can take those same stills, distort them if they want to, and produce an attack?
We do it all the time.
Now, did the strategy group or either of the entities that are part of the strategy group companies have anything to do with Alan Freeman's finances, his campaign committee's finances?
No, that's right.
Would you advise or have communications with Alan Freeman's campaign at all about the financial reporting of the Alan Freeman campaign? Do you have any knowledge or details of what communications there were or were not between Alan Freeman and Constant Content about what they're doing?
I do not have knowledge nor details of those conversations that may or may not take place.
And have you ever seen any bills sent to Alan Freeman or his campaign?
I have not.
Have you ever sent or seen any notices of in-kind contributions on behalf of the Alan Freeman?
I have not.
And I assume you agree you can't report what you don't know.
I would agree with that statement.
Now, there was one, Megan Fitzgerald.
Fitzmartin.
Third time's a charm. Megan Fitzmartin testified earlier today. And if I recall her testimony properly, she said she never signed off on any amount of media buys. But do you know whether or not that is accurate?
I would have received notification from either her or Jeff as to what took place and what was approved for placement. So I would have come from she or Jeff.
And as you sit here today, do you recall whether it came from her as opposed to Jeff, or Jeff as opposed to her, or not?
I don't recall specifically who would have approved that, but it would have been one.
She also testified that a lot of people, particularly when they're on the phone, confuse Anna Lippincott with Megan Fitzmartin.
There you go.
Have you ever had that issue of talking to one when you thought you were talking to me?
I've not.
That's all I have for you.
Mr. Hicks, any redirect?
Yeah, just real quick, because he made some statements about, he asked you questions about being involved with the campaign finance. So I think, because we don't have a definition of campaign involved, but to be clear, as it relates to things that would go into his campaign finance, you were sending invoices, you were getting approval, and you were putting disclaimers in the FCC database as to who had authorized these spends.
That is all accurate.
Okay.
I have no knowledge as to what his campaign.
What he did with it then, but, right, so, okay.
I would object that he shouldn't talk over the witness when the witness is completing his answer.
I can't disagree, but try not to speak over each other, particularly hard on the court reporter.
Okay. Just to clarify, he asked you questions about who approved. So to your knowledge, would you say that both now my brain's freezing up on Jeff Longstreth and Megan Fitzmartin were at times individually or separately, or grouped together involved in approvals that they gave you?
Approvals would have come from either Megan or Jeff,
But during the course of this campaign,
and or Jeff, sorry.
during the course of this campaign, it wasn't that it was always Jeff or it was always Megan. Your knowledge, your memory of it would be that they were both involved in that, or it went back and forth, or whoever, but one of those two gave you approvals on each thing.
One of those two gave me approvals on any expenditure.
Okay. And when they were giving you the approvals, what kind of detail would you be giving them? Would you be just talking with them, you know, it's gonna be 40 grand, or would you be giving them something printed, or I sent you a spreadsheet with the totals in it?
It depends on the expenditure and the timing. We would have had conversations though about dollar amounts and timeframes. Typically when the media buys would be made, we would have here's the dollar amount and it's going to run beginning Tuesday for 7 days or for 10 days.
Would those discussions before these things for approval be just verbal, or would your firm create some document that they would send to them saying, this is what we're looking at doing?
Oftentimes their approval, but I would have created an invoice to get paid based upon their direction.
Like these invoices, the ones that you submitted?
Correct.
So my last question, and one of the commissioners asked before about the level of detail on the invoices. Is the level of detail provided to Alan Freeman typical of the level, to the constant content, is that typical of the level of detail that you provide people on invoices? So that was number
13.
13. Is like the $95,000, a great one to look at for, just to help clear this up is?
Broadcast airtime, Cincinnati. It depends on the campaign. This would not be uncommon. Frequently, we will have flight dates in there, but I would say more than half of the time, we actually have a listing of, where it says, in this case, project, Alan Freeman, and then broadcast Cincinnati. So we would have a notification as to who those dollars were attributed to.
Is there a standard level of detail? Like if I came to you for some big campaign, like our normal thing is to do this level of detail, and is it this? Is it the normal thing, or is this?
I mean, I would say normal would just be, broadcast airtime or cable airtime or radio airtime.
It's very simple like this.
Because I'm usually I can provide, if you want more detail, I will actually provide you much more greater detail than just something written on an invoice.
To your knowledge, did either Megan Fitzmartin or Jeff Longstreth ever ask you for more detail?
I don't recall.
Okay, all right, that's all.
I would follow up to what his follow-up was.
Go ahead, Mr. Black.
My understanding is that bills from Strategic Group, or one of the companies, were sent to Constant Contact. Were any bills sent to Alan Freeman?
No bills were sent directly to Alan Freeman.
And I apologize for testing your memory about who approved what, but
Yeah.
do you have any specific memory of Megan Fitzmartin approving the amount of buys on or not?
I know Megan or Jeff would have approved them.
Right. And I also understood that before you can actually purchase airtime, you've got to pay for it, which means before you start forwarding a lot of money, you get the money from the client, right?
Correct, yeah, we do not front things on behalf of individuals or governments.
Were you involved in that transfer of money from Constant Contact or JPL or wherever it came from, so that you would have the money to purchase the advertisements? Or was somebody else involved at Strategic Group on that mechanical aspect?
I don't quite understand the question.
Then I'm probably speaking in a confusing fashion. whether it was Jeff Longstreth or Megan Fitzmartin, whoever it was, that said, we want you to spend $120,000 on this media buy.
Okay.
You would say, fine, send me $120,000. Now, would you say that, or would somebody else from your company say that? And who at the JBL Constant Contact Group would they say that to?
So I would have a conversation like on invoice 6707, where just looking at this amount, and it's probably 1,000 gross rating points of broadcast airtime in Cincinnati. We would have the conversation, hey, what's it going to take to do a full message delivery in the Cincinnati media market? We would have a conversation, I would say it's going to be $95,000, and they'd say, sometimes, great, go ahead and invoice me. Sometimes people say, I don't have that, what can you do for $75,000? Sometimes they say, well, I have 120, how else should we spend the other $25,000? So we would have conversations at that point, but at the conclusion of those conversations, we would have an agreement on, this is what we're gonna do. I would send out an invoice or have an invoice sent to them. Once that money arrives, typically either via check or via wire, I would get a notification as well as the media buyer on that account. And we would then execute that media buy per plan.
So it sounds like you have some familiarity that candidates are more than willing to authorize to spend money they have, but they might have constraints if they don't have the money.
Yes.
Nothing for that.
One last brief.
Hold on, let's see if there's any questions from commissioners at this stage.
I do have a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Morris.
Yes, my question goes to the firewall once again. I'm just intrigued by how you keep separate the information that some part of your organization gets versus the other part of the organization. Do you share servers for both the Gen Now, Growth Pack, and the SMP?
We have a public drive available to everyone.
Do you share copiers?
Copiers?
Mm-hmm.
Like I have my own copier in my office. And most people, I shouldn't say most people, about half the offices have their own copier. Half.
But is there a general copier where large print activity takes place?
There are several.
And do both sides of the organization share those large copiers?
Maybe.
That's all.
Any other questions from commissioners?
Yeah, you had testified previously that strategic media placement was hired to produce an ad for the Freeman campaign, correct?
Previous to today?
No, just here.
Oh, yes, yes.
You've been up there a long time.
Yeah, check the date.
Yeah, it seems like it's been 2 days. But anyway, you then said that once the ad was produced, you would then run it by Megan or Jeff
Yes,
to get their approval.
yes,
And then they had to get their approval from their client.
correct.
Who was their client?
Alan Freeman?
Okay, so they had to check with Alan Freeman
Yes.
on the makeup of the ad and I guess extensively the cost.
Yeah, I work with general consultants all over the United States, and it's very common that communication will be me to the GC, to the general consultant then to the candidate. They will have that discussion in terms of perhaps what's happening locally, what other factors are going into their decision on what they're doing, and then report that back to me from the GC.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, but would you, I understand the statement you just made, but would you really affirmatively know?
Know
I
that
mean, we're talking about, and I'm distinguishing between what's normal and is the practice, but do you affirmatively know in this instance, or in these instances?
I don't. I make an assumption based upon my trust of
Okay, thank you.
the general consultant.
And then I have a question.
Yes.
You said that if your confirmation, you have conversations about the cost and production, that kind of thing. So you would have, even though you can't recall specific conversations, whether it be 6707 or 6669, but you, at some point, Megan did say to you, I have, I realize this is gonna be $95,000, we're gonna run with it.
Megan or Jeff would
Or
have.
Jeff, correct.
Yes.
Okay. So, but at some point, both of them had said yes.
One or both of them would have said yes.
Thank you.
I'm gonna ask a question, I'm gonna approach you if I can, just because I think it'll be faster for me to do so.
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
This is what was previously marked as Exhibit 2,
Okay.
and then it's Exhibit 1 through 6, part of Exhibit 2. And then this appears to me to be what would be background or support for your invoices. Is that what I'm looking at?
So this is a station affidavit. So this is what we would get back from the stations after we put in our buy. So we use a software called Strata. We take that information on Strata, we push a buy out to the stations along with the check. And then I know there's one piece in here that actually had handwriting on it.
But is that the kind of
Yeah,
supporting documentation you have that would make up the
invoice?
invoice?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
And the invoice, that includes your markup of the buy, correct?
It does. Which is also shown on each of those individual invoices from the station, because it's a standard agency commission issued from the station.
Okay.
Anybody else on the commission have any questions? Mr. Hicks, do you have any follow-up?
Had a quick redirect on something Mr. Bray brought up. The invoices, and I'm looking for Brian.
You can't get it right.
It's too, I'm gonna get it right. Brian, is on, the one that was the $95,000 invoice.
Yes.
Okay? The date on it is March 9th, 2020. So they would have received this invoice before the media started to hit?
Yes.
Okay, so March 9th is, okay, did Jeff Longstreth or Megan Fitzmartin ever express to you that the candidate didn't have any appropriate amount of money in their campaign, in their bank account for these?
No. No, the assumption would have been that there was money there to pay, and otherwise we wouldn't.
Your assumption would be they wouldn't be
otherwise we're-
approving it. if
Hold
they
on,
didn't.
you can't talk at the same time, gentlemen.
Otherwise, we're not having a conversation.
Sorry. Okay, but they never expressed to you really, to Alan Freeman, any concern with his campaign having the money for any of these buys?
They never expressed such concern.
Okay, and then and then I'm done on this. The one that I just intrigued by is one that has multiple candidates on it. It's dated February 21, 2020. The primary original date was March 17th.
Okay.
And it has production time on here, and it has airtime. Would that be normal to not do your commercials until that period, that late in the cycle for the primary, or would people normally do them earlier since the original vote date was supposed to be March 17th?
At this point, you're looking at 25 days out from election day, so
Yeah.
that would be for probably the final 3 weeks of the campaign. And Mr. Hicks, I would love it if campaigns were organized enough and had money that they would actually place things ahead of time. That would make my life a lot easier, but this is typical. And I mean, even going into the final weekend, that Friday before election day, I will oftentimes be asked, oh, hey, I have an extra X amount of money, where can I put it?
Okay, but the production, is this the invoice that would have encompassed the production of the ads that I showed?
One of them. Well, no.
The Alan Freeman ads. I don't see another
The
production.
radio spot, so this would have been radio production only, not TV production.
Oh, okay. All right, that's all I had.
Mr. Bryan, any follow-up?
I do just, in follow-up actually to a question from Commissioner Roman. Is it the case that occasionally after you buy and pay for broadcast media, and they send bills and invoices, that months later, they send rebates because they didn't actually do everything that the additional invoices said they would do?
Yes.
And is that usual or unusual?
In a competitive primary environment, it is common.
And does that mean that even these initial invoices, you can't know whether that's the exact amount that was expended or ultimately owed on behalf of the county?
Correct.
Nothing further.
Commissioner, anything else? Thank you, Mr. Schweitzer.
All right, it is getting towards the 3 o'clock hour, which is noon. Don't believe that we would have time to take any additional witnesses.
I don't see another witness in today.
Yeah, well, that's what I just said.
Yeah.
Well, at one point,
No,
I do not intend to call Mr. Schweitzer again. I think that he can be excused from future matters unless Mr. Hicks disagrees.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Is that the case, Mr. Hitt?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.